On time yet? Here, now we're on. Welcome to the Provo Municipal Council work session. It's 1:35 on Tuesday, July 5th, 2016. We're gathered in the City Center Conference Room at 351 West Center in Provo, Utah. We will, this meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, Provo City Council, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. We'll begin the meeting with roll call. Mr. Mayor.
John Curtis.
Wayne Parker.
David Harding.
Gary Winterton.
Dave Van Buren.
Kim Santiago. Louise Jorgensen.
Bryce Muffler. George Stewart. Nate Connect.
Brian Jones.
Cliff Strachan.
And we excuse Councilmember David Sewell. He's traveling back today, so he won't be joining us.
Be able to serve them. We pray a blessing upon those members of our community, and specifically today for the City Council, for the Mayor, and for the administration to focus on the things which will enhance their quality of life, which will make their excitement about Provo better and higher. And we express these things and pray for a blessing to do so in Jesus Christ.
Thank you. I'm not often accused of virtuous brevity, but I think with respect to this ordinance, it might apply. As you can see, there's not a lot to it. It came from some issues that we were dealing with as a city. I think several different departments with the proximity of livestock to residential areas in the city. In the course of trying to come up with some solutions, and I know community development has been working on that problem. Robert West, the city attorney, asked me to see if I could address it specifically as it relates to swine or pigs. In the course of doing some legal research on a related issue, I came across a section of the Utah Code where the state legislature gives authority to municipal entities to regulate the location of pigsties. And so this proposed ordinance is what we came up with. It is very short and to the point. Essentially what it does increases the distance that a pigsty must be away from residential dwellings. We have things in ordinance now, I believe, where it says 100 feet. But this would increase that to 300 feet with respect to pigsties. And so we just wanted to submit that for consideration.
So, is the changes still going forward with that, or is this?
I believe they're complementary. I think they're doing both, my understanding. But this is just more specific, I think, to swine. It's increased distance. But yeah, I believe they're complementary ordinances rather than one or the other. It's because it goes down with it.
This goes into effect that the other one becomes unnecessary. But I would suggest that this language, this language from any line. If I'm a farm owner, a house in my farm, I can't have people that do that to my own house. So I would suggest that say from any residential dwelling, residential zone dwelling, or residential zone boundary line. I would suggest a little clarification on the phrase floodplain law, otherwise planning would not allow farming and represent this.
And then another consequence of that is up against, property, if their house is away from the property line, and yet they use their yard near that property line, it's actually close to, reduce the use of the yard. So I would also support making more from the boundaries, property boundaries, kind of close to the buildings. But I am a little bit, having just read the kind of justification for the last one we were looking at 2 weeks ago, didn't speak of swine at all, and what I thought was a really strong case that we may have conflict in having areas where residential agricultural zoned uses against residential agriculture, still a potential conflict where the residential agriculture has some of these buffers built in, but there's nothing agriculture against residential. So I'm a little bit surprised because I also kind of thought these were complementary and not necessarily alternatives.
So, if we're not on issues, the other laws demonstrate that I have issues. Yes. I can see why. Address the issue, but I've had some very concern that we would thinking about ways establish and the questions on their phone and so trying to anticipate every possible problem and pass laws
balance between residential and creates quite an issue there. And so I think the other proposal was to try to mitigate some of those possibilities, but
So I met with a neighborhood chair who was representing some agricultural property owners, and after explaining the ordinance, I felt much better about that. It felt like the ordinance itself, what you saw 2 weeks ago, really mitigated concerns that were raised to him. The one concern that has been raised that I don't know how to deal with is one Dave Kex alluded to, and that is a agricultural property owner has his ag zone land there. A residential development comes in close proximity, and subsequent to that, he wants to try to put on animals or a pen or a coop or a barn. He would then be affected by that residential having moved into proximity to his existing land, without it having established use already. Okay, and wanting to establish a use after that residential zone boundary line changes, that person would be affected. That is an issue that has been raised since your husband.
I would suggest, I would encourage that we maybe hold off for a little bit and take a look at it. Take a look at what kind of buffering's in place if we have the residential agriculture zone, and then look and see, do we need anything? You know, what does that have that we don't don't have if there's agriculture directly adjacent to residential. And we get a couple maybe ways to address what you just talked about, but other than hash it out here, we just pull it aside, look at it, and then come back with some recommendations.
There aren't any concerns about the swine ordinance part of that. I think we should move forward with that part of it and the other part that you're saying.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I know that we were struggling at one point with having someone being singled out. And as far as this ordinance goes, does this not single out anyone, because we're doing it citywide, this doesn't single out any one individual, which makes them feel like they have a lawsuit. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. The ordinance as we've written it would apply throughout the city. So anyone who was keeping pigs would need to keep them this far away. I think the suggestions for residential boundary line are good suggestions. Maybe make it a little bit more clear. They would be generally applicable and not give a cause of action to any particular person.
So this is a state statute, but cities can use it if they wish. So not all cities are using this ordinance that's been allowed by the state.
Sort of. So the state statute allows municipalities authority, broad discretion to regulate pigsties. It doesn't say specifically how. Our department took it and sort of said, this seems like a reasonable thing to do. And so that is how we put it together. Of course, how great or how small that distance might be, I think that's something that the council can do whatever they would wish to do. And I think the statute gives very broad authority. It pretty much says when it comes to pigsties, you can do what you want with them. So in that way, they're a little bit different, I think, than maybe some other land use interests, in that the state legislature has given that authority through statute. Does that respond to it?
Bill, did you talk to whatever the chair with Brian?
Yes.
And those people that were concerned about the other ordinance they talked about, this big ordinance,
This wasn't available when we spoke. Almost 2 weeks ago, right after your meeting. But I think this doesn't conflict with any of the concerns he raised.
So are there other questions? So we'll look for a motion then to make any adjustments that we would like to, as far as boundary versus structures, and then move this to our next council meeting.
So to me, the two kind of outstanding questions to me are dwellings versus boundary lines. Even then, are we more worried about boundary lines, property boundaries between, say, residential and agriculture? Would we be opposed to a pigsty being near a boundary line with another agricultural property? I can see it going either way. And then the second question that I have is the 300 feet. I'm curious, like, where did that 300 feet come from? Was that just, that sounds about right from the planning? Or do we have people with agricultural experience saying, at 300 feet away, the smells are okay and whatnot? Or, so I'm just curious where the 300, and if the council would like to get some feedback from people who would be affected on whether 300 feet is sufficient or too excessive.
If I may address that real quickly, to some extent, the figure is arbitrary. I had one of my law clerks look into similar ordinances that exist throughout the country, and he came up with 300 feet as a general average figure for pigsty type distance requirements.
So in some cases, if that was an average, it was more.
I think that's true, yes.
And when it comes to distance and smell, it's just way the wind's blowing sometimes. But I feel good about 300, okay? How do you feel?
So when we apply it to the instance that this causes the promotion, that would not only make it far and smell, it just limits his ability to do it. But what I'm concerned more about are those who are farmers, established farmers right now, with their house, with some corrals or sheds, and for some reason the pig market's good, and they decide to. So.
Maybe grandfather?
Currently existing.
What are you trying to do?
Yeah, they say they change, just like they change their crops, they change their animal or something. That's the one that people are raising pigs right now. But I just think that. Okay, that's not what I'm worried without talking to 2 or 3 of those people. But I forgot it's the time before it comes up. I'm all right to go forward with it if we answer some of those questions that have a discussion with farmers down there.
The other thought that I had was, if it was a national average, there are some farms that are just hundreds of acres, you know, I mean, they're large farms nationwide where we have smaller farms here, so I don't know, you know, how that affects some of our, the size of farms probably not. But those discussions, I mean, we could take some time and bring it back to a work session after having those discussions, or we could put it on the agenda for a council meeting and have that, you know, discussion with the public, and have legal come back with some suggestions of boundary lines.
No, it's not a matter of further. It's a matter of, is that too far?
More restrictive. And maybe we say, you know, is there a point in time where we say, we just kind of don't want pigs being farmed close to any residence? And so if you're a farmer, don't look at raising pigs. I don't know. I'm not sure what that balance is.
Or should it's a health issue?
Well, it's interesting that if you look at the title to the state statute that authorizes this, it says, it's entitled something along the lines of authorization to control pigsties, privies, and other offensive establishments. And it's singling out pigsties for special treatment because of the health concerns on the offensive odors.
And there are very small offensive animals too, you know, that can create quite a nuisance, not a nuisance, but just, yeah, I don't want to say out loud like I'm going to anyone ideas, but yeah, I don't know. I think this is a good start, since we obviously have this issue, and then looking at some of the other issues down the road, but
We put it in a public hearing to where if there are those that have those concerns, just let them know so they can be expressed.
Brian, you know, Bryce and Ryan, is there anything we can report them and say, can we look at this? I know that Gary has looked at it closely with his attorney, as an attorney. Can we have them look at it possibly with the practicality?
I would just respond that I think most things that get into state code have been somewhat vetted. Okay? I'm not going to raise any pigs, and so I make a motion that we go ahead and forward this to the next council meeting along with the changes to the distance as for the boundary. Instead of using the house with the boundary line.
So property line.
Yeah, property boundary. Between different zones.
2 different zones.
Yeah, because between 2 different agricultural uses, they're in the same boat. Agricultural, in my opinion.
Yeah, but if I'm not living on an agricultural, doing say horses, and just because my house is on the other side of the property, no, that doesn't matter. I could have a house really close to the property line, and my next door neighbor decides to raise pigs on the property line. Okay, that could be a problem as well.
Agree? Any
I mean, I think it could be a problem being offensive, but I don't know if they can legislate. Now we're starting to legislate both in agricultural land zones you can do this and you can't do that. I don't know if that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
So we're doing it between agriculture and residential.
that's where I was. We could talk about that, but me, when you're with the farming business, I think you're not attending farming's cost.
I guess there may be some people that choose to live in an agricultural zone that may not want to do it, but agriculture is pretty broad. I guess it comes back to Kay's thought earlier, are we getting to the point where we just say, pigs aren't the ultimate purple? And to me, this is kind of approaching that. And if we define it as 300 feet from any property line, now we're saying they're not welcome unless you've got a really big plot of agricultural land. And if you've got it so big that you keep it 300 feet from any boundary line, then go ahead. So it's not as drastic as saying no pigs, but it would be more limiting, no question.
Maybe if we reach out to the farming community and ask them to give feedback on the distance, what they feel like is an appropriate distance, and then we always have neighbors in that neighborhood who give their ideas about what the appropriate distance is for residential, and maybe we can come to some sort of a compromise. Maybe it's not 300 feet or something close, but not quite 300 that is workable.
So that said, so I'm kind of still making a motion there. Do we really want to put this on the agenda if we're not clear between, if it's just between agricultural and residential, or if it's like Dave was saying, that any other property owner that you don't want to put 300 feet because it might impact their house, which might be close to the property line?
One of the benefits of having it on the agenda, the public agenda, is that you'll get people out. It's one way to get people out. It doesn't mean we have to make a decision that night. If we don't feel like we're ready to make a decision that night, we can continue it. But it gets publicized, and we can reach out in the meantime to.
Right, I'm just saying, in order to advertise, we have to be clear. Is it any property line or just residential versus agricultural property lines? Which way do we want to go?
It would be the two.
And go more restricted when we back it off. So, and
as the default, meaning that's what we'll present, and then we'll hear the feedback, and then we can back it off. That's fine.
Gary, as we approach an ordinance that just says no swine, do we start losing the spirit of the state statute that we're starting to?
Well, I think it's an interesting question, because the language it uses says that the municipality may regulate the location thereof. And I think that maybe begs the question whether there can be an outright can't have them here. I'm not sure that it's clear one way or another. I think a good lawyer can argue either side of that question, because you could say a location is there is no location in this city.
Right.
So from my reading of the statute, I think it contemplates the fact that they could be in the municipality, just where they're allowed to be can be regulated.
From an enforcement standpoint, Gary, do you feel strongly one way or another? Or what would be helpful in your mind?
I don't think you get large differences in enforcement.
Whether it's dwelling or property line, any boundary line. Okay. So can you repeat the motion?
Moving forward this ordinance to the next meeting based on changes that would address use not being adjacent.
Just a second. Mr. Stewart.
And as we tried to address the problem that exists, it just wasn't what the style was, but it was the fencing and it was the ability. And so we're helping with part of that, but we're not really solving it totally. Is that the other ordinance? I think addressed fencing.
Well, there's also, I think the words secure outdoor enclosed area were also chosen specifically. I think that word secure
Okay.
means you could also be prosecuted for having an insecure area, even if it was outside.
You know, a pig slice 300 feet away, it's that open field, let's get out.
Right. I believe that was the word was chosen for that.
That's correct.
Any other discussion on the motion? Those in favor? Thank you. The vote is unanimous in favor. Thank you. Next item of business is a discussion on the Parkway Plaza potential redevelopment area. This will be presented by David White.
Madam Chair, members of the council, good afternoon. As you are probably aware, the Parkway, the Plum Tree Plaza area has been purchased by Westport Capital, a group out of Southern California. They're looking to redevelop the whole site. They have a fairly ambitious plan that they have reviewed a little bit with staff. They're looking forward to making a formal submittal here shortly. And they have are anticipating about 300,000 square feet of office space. And to enable them to meet all the parking ratios required for office, they are requesting that the redevelopment agency consider adopting a redevelopment project, maybe back that up, a community reinvestment project area for just that plaza, for just that area. With recent changes in redevelopment law in the state of Utah, it's been renamed as a community reinvestment project area. There are two different ways that you could do that. One would be to include eminent domain. That would require a light study and so forth. They're just asking for a regular community reinvestment project area, which would be similar to the community development project areas. As a side note, for all the project areas that existed prior to the change in the last legislative session, they will be controlled by the law that was in place when they were adopted. So Westport Capital is requesting that the agency consider adopting a project area. This would be the kickoff resolution for that. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
I'm not familiar with the changes in the state law. What did that do?
It basically, prior to this, there were 3 different routes that you could go. You have a community development project area.
Shot in the arm for University Parkway in Provo. This group is well capitalized. They're bringing some energy and momentum to Plum Tree Plaza area, which is now bleeding over into Parkway Village, where the neighborhood Walmart is located. It's true that we would have liked a lot more retail at this location. The reality is if the retail is going to be healthy, it needs to be strategic, it needs to be purposeful and the right amount. And so I think the offices and truly the mix where the name comes from is a mix of office, retail, residential, hospitality is really market driven and responding to the market and going where they believe the market will go. Obviously with what's being done just up the road in Orem, there's a lot going on there. This is that much closer to the university. I think we'll be able to capitalize on some of the things that are happening there and the desire to be. It is very difficult to be near BYU if you want to do offices. And a lot of the places just built up where it's a going concern. Or Plumtree Plaza is an older property, has not had any major refurbishment in many years and now mostly vacant. And that was even before Westport picked it up. I think this is the right direction, and I think it'll be a big win for Provo.
Are there tenants lined up for that already?
So they're working on that. In fact, the Westport folks were down at the ICSC conference in Las Vegas with our staff, with Dave and Scott, and Mayor Curtis had also gone down. While most of those are not able to announce yet, one of the things they have announced is the Cafe Rio, which will be brought out to University Parkway in a larger facility, have drive up outside dining. It will not be any more quiet when you eat there. I just want for the record. But they are working on a number of users that are more boutique and specific, not just run of the mill what they've had there in the past. Some of the outer businesses, the Olive Garden, the JCWs, those will remain, those are on separate pads. But they want to be very specific in the retail and not just open it up to whoever. And we do believe those will be able to be made public here in the near future, but they are still working on some of those leases.
What about the office space?
The office space, they have recruited Brandon Fugel, who is probably the top agent in Utah, if not the Intermountain West, to work on that. And again, they're not ready to make any announcements, so those are things that they're working on at the moment.
So when we talk about taxes on the property, they'll still continue to pay the current level of taxes, but not on the increased value of the typical.
No, they'll pay all the taxes. So what's going to happen is that all the tax entities will get the same amount that they're currently getting. So the city will get the same amount, school district gets the same amount, county and so forth. What will happen is that with the increase in the value, Westport will pay more capital, but a part of that increase will be potentially if the taxing entities sign the interlocal agreements, that a portion of that increase would be captured by the Redevelopment Agency and used to help construct parking structures. So yeah, so it's you know, we won't be waiving taxes for anybody. Plumtree's not requesting, Westport's not requesting a waiver of the taxes or forgiveness of the taxes. We're just hoping to capture a portion of the increase in the assessed value. And that tax increment will be then used to help build parking structures.
Or any fees either.
No fees. Now they have not asked for any fees.
What other CDAs are in the area?
In the area?
Yeah. Is there one currently there now, or?
There was one by DI in that State Street area that kind of moved that direction, but there's no.
We had auto dealers.
The auto dealers? Oh, okay.
Is that still active?
I think so. Dixon, do you know for sure? The auto dealers, Larry Miller campus is there. A redevelopment project area there.
That was actually a retail deal, not so much as an RDA deal. And again, yes, so sales tax deal, in fact, the only retail deal that we've ever done, and consequence we'll talk about later.
And then kind of the second question, while we're considering this, has a wider CRA been considered? Maybe
Yes.
Including Parkway Village?
Yes, we have spoken with that. Kind of based on the different timelines, it's kind of more feasible to go separate, create separate project areas for either side of the University Parkway.
Okay, it has been looked at.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
What is the estimated increase in taxes for that area?
It would go from about, they're currently on the books for about they're planning to do $120 million worth of improvement. I believe they're on the books for about somewhere around 30. So not quite $90 million more of investment. I'd be happy to.
And the parking structure would be how much of that 30? So the 30 million would be the extra above.
Well, that would be the extra, the value. So
Above what we're already getting.
right. So they are actually looking to do 2 parking structures on the site. So, and depending on how big we scale them, it's going to actually be the cost factor for it. So
they haven't been designed yet?
No, they have not been designed yet.
To put that 140 million in context, when Town Center Mall was built in 96, 97, that was a $100 million investment. And that was for the entire thing. Again, this piece is probably about half the size, and they're putting $140 million into it.
I would, if you would move this to the regular council agenda. The developer, the representative.
All right, so we have a motion.
I'll second that.
And a second. Can you repeat the motion again? To move to investigate. Okay. So, those in favor? Thank you. It's unanimous. And the next item is the funding of utility and infrastructure improvements at the Provo Municipal Airport for Duncan Aviation. This will be introduced by our city CAO, Wayne Parker.
Madam Chair, members of the council, thank you. I'm just going to introduce quickly and then we'll turn to Dixon Holmes to kind of manage the presentation today. But back in the 2007 timeframe, is that about right? We began the process of having conversations with Duncan Aviation at the corporate level about the location of a 3rd major aircraft maintenance facility in their corporate world. They had 2 in the Midwest. They were looking for what they called a Western States facility. They were looking at a number of locations, including 2 in Utah and 1 in New Mexico. And they went through a very thorough site selection process, probably more thorough than I've experienced in my time working in economic development, where they brought a team of about 30 people here from their corporate offices and learned all they could learn about Provo. We had frontline workers to HR professionals to their finance people. We came to do a very thorough look at the Provo community. And we were fortunate to work with the state and with our own process to try to define a package under which they would be willing to come and locate in Provo. The good news was that they were bringing 600 over a period of several years, 600 household sustaining jobs, which at the time was one of our key economic development measures. Can we bring jobs, not just call center jobs, not just part-time jobs, not just student jobs, but can we bring jobs that bring us sufficient income to support a family? And Duncan was one of those that were clearly in our target for bringing to the airport a facility like this. And so Dixon will go through the history of the incentive package and where we find ourselves today. But let me say there are and were communities all over the Intermountain West that would have loved to bring Duncan to their communities. In fact, one of our competitor cities brought an incentive package from the state, that particular state compared to our state, which was about 4 times the value of the incentive package offered in Utah. And yet, for a whole variety of reasons, they wanted to be located here. Under ideal circumstances, we would have consummated this deal, built the infrastructure, and they would have been in operation several years ago. Unfortunately, right after 2007, as you'll recall, we ran into the Great Recession. Corporate aircraft became in the crosshairs of the federal administration. There were lots of critics of those who flew corporate jets to testify in the TARP deal, you may remember, and so the bottom kind of fell out of Duncan's world for a little bit. And so they asked if they could have some time to work through that. And again, we hadn't executed any agreements. We were just not at that point. And we said, absolutely, come back to us when you're ready. And so they established a small satellite facility here in Provo. And again, Mr. Prohaska will talk a little bit about that, in an effort to meet some obligations they had with one of their key clients. And that facility's been operational since that time. And just recently, we had feedback from Duncan that they were now ready. They had, as you'll recall, they had some issues they had to resolve with the State Department of Environmental Quality relative to emissions from the paint booth that they were proposing to do at this facility. And only recently, within the last 90 days or so, have reached now a place where they feel comfortable with the Department of Environmental Quality and the Governor's Office of Economic Development. And so we then began the process of going through a more robust due diligence on the infrastructure that would be required to support a Duncan facility. And we'll talk about that review and what the numbers look like. But I wanted to give you at least a little context that this has been a deal that's been in the works now for the better part of 10 years in trying to get this facility ready and operational, and all the contracts in place so that we could bring a larger scale Duncan operation here. These are great jobs. They're the kinds of jobs lots and lots of cities are anxious to bring to the table, and I think you'll be pleased with what you hear today. So with that, I'll maybe ask Dixon to just kind of introduce a little bit of the history, and then we'll get a number of presenters today, and then we'll get into some of the details on the numbers.
Thank you. Just real quickly, I will not send around the big files, but those are a couple of the proposals that we put together when we first became aware of Duncan back in 2007, and had the opportunity to meet with them. In 2008, 3 council members at the time, Councilmember Stewart, Midge Johnson, and Steve Turley, along with 3 school board members, went out to Duncan Aviation. There was another contingency that had gone out earlier, but this is one of our elected officials who went out in 2008 just to experience what Duncan was doing, and that was in their Battle Creek facility. Currently, we are also attempting to make arrangements for another trip to the Lincoln facility, and we are working with your staff to potentially do that in August, depending on schedules and how that all lines out. But Duncan did become operational in 2010 currently at the airport. In fact, at the time, they had just occupied a building that Millionaire was bringing online for their own purposes, and they were able to make arrangements and do that. But I want to emphasize that this was an inducement. When we heard about Duncan, the competition was pretty stiff. In fact, in early 2007, they had made kind of a stealth visit to our airport unannounced twice. And again, we didn't know anything about it. And then we finally engaged, and we were able to put something together. And it was a very competitive operation. Part of the challenge is that our airport is a great facility, but it's not really set up for business development as it currently sits. And part of what we're discussing today starts moving us in that direction, to have the utility and infrastructure to support not only this operation, but future operations. I do not want to oversell that, but many of the utilities that are being provided at the airport will allow for future development at the airport, not only for commercial services, but for other business park. Also to that point, the Municipal Council has, by virtue of the general plan, set up and put an area in place for future business development at the airport. It's that area south of 3110 and on the east and west side of 3110. So that's where future business development will take place. Our recently adopted Economic Development Strategic Plan also identifies aviation as a key component. It's also consistent with the state's some of their strategies as far as job creation and growth. Certainly, there are other aspects and benefits that come from that. We'll talk about those shortly. What I'd like to do now is turn time over to Bill Prohaska, who is the general manager here in Provo, to have him give an overview on what Duncan brings to Provo. And then we've also asked a number of other speakers, hoping to hear from our airport manager, Steve Gleason, and then also from the state. We've invited Teresa Foxley, who is with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and also Jeff Edwards, who is with the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. Thank you. Both of them will speak to state benefits. I'll talk a little bit more about the local benefits, and then we'll get right into the funding requests. And we have folks here from Public Works and our finance division that we can talk more specifically about the request. So with that, Mr. Prohaska. Bill Prohaska, I'm the general manager, site manager here at this facility. I've got a presentation put together that'll be pretty quick. It's just going, for those of you who haven't been out and been able to see one of our sites or haven't gone online and looked us over a little bit, this gives you a little snapshot of who we are, what we do in the industry, and then we'll talk about what that means to Provo. You can go ahead, whoever's got the slide, or I have it here. Okay.
Might have to turn it on first.
Okay. I'm a pilot, you're gonna have to help me. There we go, thanks. There we go. This is a shot we took of our Michigan facility that a few of you did visit up there a few years ago, and this is the size of the hangar that we're looking at here at Provo, so it's very representative of what we would be proposing to build. Quick history of the company. We're about 60 years old. Actually, this fall we'll celebrate our 60th anniversary. Still privately held. We're owned by Robert and Karen Duncan and the kids. So it's a small family business. Early on, Robert was good friends with Bill Lear. He helped invest some money into the Learjet development. Everybody thought he was nuts, and we all know where that went over the last few decades. Grew through sales, shifted to service in the early 80s when there was a downturn in our industry. Currently about 2,400 jobs right now. We got 600 in Battle Creek. We're pushing 1,400 in Lincoln. That number's a little outdated right now. That's Lincoln, Nebraska, and Battle Creek, Michigan. We've got 150 domestic people in rapid response locations around the country, and then we've got 41 in Provo right now. And we do have reps around the globe. All of our operations are domestic. We don't do any maintenance internationally, but we've got people on every continent knocking on doors and just trying to recruit business in. So that's our new facility in Lincoln that we just built a year or two ago. They've got a couple just beauty shots in here. That's typically what you'll see in one of the hangars. The challenge when we started out in 2007 was to find a Western location that would satisfy the smaller needs of our Western-based customers in the U.S. It would also get us a little bit closer to the Pacific Rim and Southeast Asia for clients coming in. What we looked at initially was just the community, not from a business perspective, but from a lifestyle, cost of living, quality of recreation, educational opportunities, because we knew we had to have a place that our people would want to live and raise a family. We proved that with one of the communities that Dixon mentioned. We had one, or I think Wayne may have mentioned, we had one city that offered us this huge incentive package, but I don't think I'd want to walk through the town at night. So it just wasn't going to work. So that's where we started out. Provo fit all the parameters well, along with about a half a dozen other cities. We looked at airport parameters like the runway elevations, average temperatures, that kind of thing. Provo did very well. One real asset of the Provo Airport, and I would challenge everyone to maintain this forever, is a buffer zone around the airport. That's what made us walk away from quite a few communities. Where we're doing engine runs and we're doing maintenance operations, you don't need a backyard 200 feet away. So you've got a beautiful, about a 1 mile buffer zone that's agricultural right now, and maintain that. That's great. Easy airline access out of Salt Lake initially, and now out of Provo. We have customers from LA and from Phoenix that use the Legion quite often.
in an atmosphere that, again, where people would want to live. These are just some of the hangars. That's one of the new hangars in Lincoln. We do heavy maintenance on aircraft, so you'll see wings off, tails off, engines off. We do a little bit of everything to them. Core values, if you go through very quickly, I'll just give you a few seconds to glance through them. Probably the key on there is lead through action and innovation, focus on solutions, try to be a very, very positive, supportive company for all of our peers inside. And the bottom one is the one Robert Duncan put on. It's a core value to be proud of what you do. So we do leave that in there. Paint facility, this again is representative of the paint bay that we would build here. So I just wanted to give you some kind of a snapshot of that. People working on an interior. The process when we started selecting the western location, we identified 44 cities west of the Rockies that fit all the parameters we were looking for. Through initial phone calls and just a little initial research, we eliminated 22 of them. And then we went in and visited those 22 with our team, and we narrowed that down to the top 6. Went back to those 6 several times, and then the top 3, we went back in quite a few times, just to make sure we really had a grasp of how the community operated. So, and we did come in on a stealth trip and sit in on a city council meeting and all the finalists. So, a couple more shots just of what we do. These are the kind of positions, kind of jobs we'll have. Be creating. Our average salary right now is about $27 an hour. When we open this facility, we'll probably be in the 30 range. And it's going to be everything from installers, upholsterers, mechanics, engine mechanics, engineers, and then all the support roles that go with that. So a little bit of everything. What really nailed it down for Provo was crime rate was incredibly low compared to a lot of the competition, especially when you look out west. One of the lowest unemployment rates, very family oriented, very friendly, which just felt a lot like our company when you walked around the community. And the relationships within Provo were very positive from what we could sense.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you say it's a family-friendly community, can you elaborate? I mean, we like to think we are, but.
You know, an example would be our president and I did ride-alongs with the police departments in all of the top, I think it was the top 10 communities. And in a couple of other communities that I won't mention, you know, the car would just turn around the corner and kids that were in the area would stop. They'd just flee. You could tell there was not a good relationship there. When you attended a city council meeting, there was just a lot of this instead of a lot of, we understand and we hear you, and that kind of thing. In Provo, we turned the corner in the police car and everybody, I mean, kids were waving at the officer. I knew they didn't know me, so, but that's just refreshing. One of the first things we did was just park and go into a supermarket. I can't even tell you which one, but just a supermarket in town. And as we're walking up to the door, a lady walked out with her bags in her arms and she said, "Isn't it a beautiful morning?" And we said, "You have no idea." So that's what we're looking for. So some of the interiors, when we do the interiors, we do build the cabinetry and do everything in-house here. This is not Delta or Allegiant. Paint jobs we do, we do about 300 paint jobs a year between all of our facilities and a lot of custom stuff. So it's one of our own aircraft. Robert Duncan, our second generation chair emeritus, his father is who organized the company back in the 50s. And Robert has an interesting taste in paint for his aircraft. And that one's been out, it was out here a couple weeks ago in Provo. So if you see something very strange overhead, it's probably one of ours. Todd is our current chairman, third generation. And that's all I have. Any questions? The project we're looking at here, phase one, we're expecting to be about 425 jobs. that would come in, and phase two would be up in the 600 to 700 range.
Additional?
No, cumulative total 700.
Thank you.
We must stay smaller than Lincoln. So I've been told.
So the tour that you've arranged for August is to see the current facility in Nebraska, and it's similar to what you have in Michigan as well?
Yes. Phase one here will be about 250,000 square feet. The hangar we're in now is 15,000. So we just want to walk everybody through a hangar about that size to get a feel for it. And Lincoln just recently built actually our paint facility and our initial maintenance hangar. When the economy took the tank in 2008, we had our drawings pretty well finalized. So when Lincoln needed capacity, they just took Provo's drawing and built it. So we've been reminding them they've got 2.0, we'll have 3.0, because we're looking at what they've learned over the last 2 or 3 years now, and we're changing a few things. So the hangar you walk through there, both for paint and maintenance, will be very representative of what's going to be here.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thanks.
So Steve Gleason is en route. He is probably actually flying here right now in the term. So if we could have Teresa Foxley and Jeff Edwards with the Governor's Office of Economic Development and EDC to make a brief presentation, and we'll catch up with Steve in a moment. Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you, Dixon, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the council. Mayor, we're very delighted to be here today. My name is Teresa Foxley. I'm the Deputy Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and we're incredibly enthusiastic about this project. I think, Bill, you undersell it a little bit. It's really, really cool. Some of the stats that I wanted you all to be aware of, and Dixon's asked us to speak specifically on the statewide impact of this project, are that the company will be spending about $53 million in CapEx on this project, which is significant. A lot of that money will end up circulating in this community and throughout the state. Bill mentioned that phase one would have 425 jobs, and then they would grow up to 700 jobs. Those are all high-paying, family-sustaining wages. In fact, the average will be over 150% of the Utah County average, which is, the Utah County average is $38,000 per year. So if you total that up over a 15-year period, that's $389 million in new wages that will be circulating in this economy. And from a statewide perspective, we're enthusiastic about that, of course, because that translates into about $20 million in new state revenue for the state. Why is this an important project for us? It will be the first MRO or maintenance operation in the state, and so it will enhance one of our 6 strategic clusters, which is aerospace and defense. But what really excites us about this project is the enthusiasm that we have seen from this community, from everyone from the mayor to Wayne to Dixon. I've been on the phone with and have expressed a sincere desire to land this project here, and so we will be delighted to have the opportunity to partner with Provo on this project. I've spoken with several of your community leaders who have also expressed enthusiasm about Silicon Slopes and some of the high-tech jobs that are going on in this community, but a real desire to continue to diversify this economy and to bring jobs that will create employment opportunities all up and down the economic ladder and all up and down the employment and education ladder, which this project will do. From a state standpoint, we are prepared to take an incentive request to our Governor's Office of Economic Development Board. We would do that as early as next Thursday, depending on where the city council is. One of the things that our program requires is that there be some kind of a local community match and partnership. And so again, enthusiastic about this. This is one of our guiding principles, is to help local communities achieve their economic development goals. And I think this could be a really great example of that for the state and for Provo City. So I'm happy to turn the time over now to my colleague Jeff Edwards with EDC Utah, or take questions, whatever order you prefer.
The questions for Ms. Foxley?
Maybe after we see what we're supposed to match. That'd be great.
Thank you.
It's been great to be back with the council again, talking about this project and working with Dixon and the mayor. It's always a pleasure. Jeff Edwards with Economic Development Corporation of Utah. Our role in the state, working closely with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, is to be the recruiting arm of the state. We're to go out and look for businesses to bring to the state to create new jobs that are here. And of course, we work with existing companies that are already here. If we were starting from scratch today, and we were out looking for an aviation-related business to bring to the state, I've got to tell you that Duncan Aviation would be at the top of that list. This is a very well-known company in their circle and the business that they are in. I've had a chance to go to many international trade shows where they're represented along with their competitors. And just walking the show floor and talking to people that are there, it's very clear that this company has an outstanding reputation for not only for taking care of the business of aviation that you've seen in the photographs, what the kind of business that they're in, but more importantly for doing what they say they're going to do. And they can talk to their customers, and these are a very sophisticated group of customers that have got multi-million-dollar aircraft that they're handing over to someone to say, take care of this for me and do it right and do it the first time, do it right the first time. And that is clearly the kind of company that Duncan is. I had occasion to visit Battle Creek when we were in the midst of this very competitive process. And if you had in these photographs, you can see this, that the floors are painted with gray epoxy paint, and the aircraft are lined up just like this, and the toolboxes are lined up just like this, and everyone's in uniform with their names. And in fact, there's a board in Bill's hallway that's got a photograph of every employee, their name, their title, and exactly what they do in the company. And they all know each other on a first name basis. It's like, it really is a true family company. And as Bill said, they went through a very careful process to choose where they're going. And this choice of coming to Provo was very deliberate. They spent a lot of time at it, a lot of money, but more importantly, a lot of their top executives' time to make this, because they realized they had to make one choice and do the right choice and get it right the first time. And I know that they felt that way, having talked to them ever since then. I hope that Bill perhaps didn't elaborate on this, but there's another side to this, and that's not only the impact of the jobs that Duncan creates, but the impact that it has on the community itself. Imagine that you're a corporate aircraft owner. You're trying to find a way to get a new engine fitted or an inspection that the FAA requires. You're going to send your flight crew with your airplane someplace, and they go and they spend time with the airplane. They don't leave the airplane. They leave it here. They've got to be there to watch it, be sure it happens. Those folks are here in Provo, and what are they doing? They're all staying in hotels, they're eating in restaurants, they're visiting the resorts. And one of the attractions of the Provo location, and I know as nice as Lincoln is, and as nice as Battle Creek is, doesn't quite measure up to the mountains and all the other things that there are here to do in Utah. And I think they've been a little bit surprised at the level of excitement their customers have when they come here. And sometimes they're here for weeks or even months at a time, adding yet another impact to the community as well. But lastly, I just want to talk about why this matters to us as a state. Teresa said it quite well, and that's certainly the economic impact of this. But from a business recruiting point of view, aviation, in my experience, is an industry that like begets like. In other words, aviation companies like being near other aviation companies because of the workforce that gets created, and the expertise, and that skill set that they can tap again and again and again. And if you think about the aerospace industry in the state, there are almost 30,000 people in our state that work in the aviation-related industries. And so a good deal of that is military. But in the last decade, we've grown the commercial side of that business very substantially. You're aware of Boeing. Boeing now in Utah has almost 1,000 people working for Boeing building commercial airplane parts up in Salt Lake City and in West Jordan. There are dozens of suppliers that here in Utah County and elsewhere that are making parts for those same companies. And so it's part of that. And us as a state, we're trying to find ways to grow that whole industry as a whole. So of course this brings benefit to Utah County. It brings benefits to Provo City, but from our perspective in the state, that it adds to our reputation as a state to give us the ability to add even more aviation jobs and to grow this whole sector by having a company with the sophistication and capabilities that Duncan has. I recognize this is a step for you as a community to make this decision, but from a statewide perspective, we're very supportive of this and would encourage you to embrace this and take advantage of this wonderful opportunity that's right in your backyard. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions if anybody has them.
Other questions for Mr. Edwards? Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Gleason, I'm the airport manager. Sorry that I'm late and that I didn't put a tie on. I apologize for both of those things simultaneously. Airport benefits. Duncan Aviation is a very well-respected member of the aviation community. It's a big company, and it's not just a big company, it's a company that has a great reputation. So anytime you have a company with a great reputation at your airport, it naturally increases the reputation of the airport. Much like me being in this room, I'm a better person for having been here, just as the airport is a better place if we have Duncan. The other couple of things that Duncan does that are direct benefits to the airport, number one is it gives us a leasehold on a very large piece of land. So that's a revenue producer for us. Also, fuel, we get our money from fuel flowage fees. We get 6 cents for every gallon that is pumped in to an aircraft. Duncan doesn't work on small aircraft, so that increases that revenue source as well. A couple of other things that it does for us that aren't quite as obvious. First of all, every year we worry about the loss of our air traffic control tower due to funding. The air traffic control tower costs quite a bit to keep running, and the federal government does a cost-benefit analysis based on your base aircraft, size of those aircraft, value of those aircraft, number of operations that occur at your airport. Every year, every airport in our situation has to go to Washington. We have to fight to try and keep our tower there. Having a company like Duncan increases our cost-benefit analysis, increases the probability that we keep our air traffic control tower, which is desperately needed at the airport, where we have a huge flight school, and also we're going to move about 120,000 passengers through the airport for passenger service this year. Control tower becomes vital for us to keep air passenger service at the airport, as well as making sure that all of our students at UVU are safe and accounted for. So it increases the airport revenue, it increases the airport profile, and it increases our cost-benefit analysis. One of the benefits of having a control tower and having commercial service that you may not know about is our FAA funding. Right now we are in an entitlement program that gives us $1 million a year in FAA funding to maintain our airports. Airports are very expensive to maintain. We just did a runway project that cost about $8 million. That was paid for by the FAA. Part of the reason that we're able to get that kind of money to keep our airport running is because we have a cost-benefit analysis that keeps our control tower there, and also the control tower helps us keep our commercial air service, which puts us into that funding category. So those are some indirect things that having Duncan at our airport will do. Those are, probably the most important things. Another thing that it does at your airport, especially a company like Duncan, is the type of jobs that we're bringing in. And I apologize, I'm late. Somebody may have already covered this. A lot of times when you do economic development, you get a few high-paying, skilled labor jobs, and then a lot of low-paying, unskilled labor jobs. With a company like Duncan, one of the things that you get, one of the greatest benefits, is you get a lot of skilled labor positions. These are jobs that don't necessarily require a college degree, but they pay very well. They pay a livable wage. So it's kind of what you're looking for if you're an airport or an economic developer. You want to make sure that those jobs are high-wage jobs, not low-wage jobs. And Duncan provides a great deal of those and not as many of the low-wage, low-skill jobs. So it's got a good balance there. So from the airport standpoint, that's what we get out of having Duncan there. Not to mention the fact that we just get a company that is so well respected and just such a well-known company that it helps all of us. It would help us in every type of recruitment that we try and do at the airport. It's a good anchor tenant, if you want to look at it that way, to draw other people in. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any about the airport.
Steve?
I knew you'd have that.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. I'm happy to ask this. I know that we're getting fulfilled. We've got to make some decisions about our airport, and we've got terminals coming forward. We're looking at other infrastructure with this Duncan Aviation. I guess the bottom line is we need some input on what we want to do. We need to decide as a community what we want our airport to become.
I agree.
And it's going to cost, what kind of investment are we willing to put into it as a community?
The state right now has started an economic impact study on all airports that will be updated. They did that economic update already in the year 2000, and the estimate was somewhere between 19 and $20 million of city revenue per year from having one commercial flight per day at your airport. It's an estimate. That's multiplier effects, that's jobs created, that's all those kinds of things. But there are two different types of airport. There are commercial service airports, and there are three. There are general aviation airports, think Spanish Fork. Commercial service airports, think Salt Lake International. And then there's a third type, and that is a corporate airport. You're going to want to think about like Centennial Airport in Denver. All of those airports are good, and all of them serve a different purpose. Right now, we are really transitioning towards a corporate airport and a commercial service airport. We're becoming less and less of a GA airport, a Spanish Fork type airport. When I first arrived at the airport 17 years ago, if we had a Gulfstream 550 show up at the airport, I'm not kidding you, half the city came down. Mayor Stewart will remember this. Half the city would come down and look at it because it was sort of an anomaly. If we got a really big jet, everybody came to look at it. We took pictures of it. I have pictures of myself standing in front of the first 727 that showed up at the airport. Now they're everywhere. We have 27 base jets. We have several 550s, 650s, all the type of jet that Duncan draws in. We love general aviation, and I hope general aviation continues to thrive at the airport. It's something that I love, and I love those little aircraft. So if we can fly 50 Cessnas and not recoup the revenue we get out of one Gulfstream. More than that, we can fly 100. So as we make the transition to more of a corporate and commercial airport, Duncan fits perfectly with that model, which is the direction that we're just naturally going. Spanish Fork is starting to take over some of the GA market, and we are just naturally transitioning into the corporate and commercial end. But we do have property set aside for a terminal. That's becoming extremely important to us because Allegiant Air continues to expand its air service. And at this point, they're just telling me they can't expand anymore until we have at least 2 gates, because right now they have to be careful of scheduling. We can't overlap. So we have got property set aside to build the terminal. It is not the property where Duncan's going, and we have the property set aside for the corporate end, which is the Duncan end of the airport. Did I answer that or just ramble?
No, I think that's great. I think that we need to look at the vision that we're having down there and see if that's the vision we want to be going. I'm excited about it.
I agree. And we can lead and make the airport into whatever the community and you all as elected officials decide you want the airport to be. That's what we've been doing. Commercial service, corporate, that transition to that type of flying. Yeah.
So as we go forward, what do you envision the needs at the airport for firefighting as we get more and more flights?
I don't want to step on the firefighters' toes. They know what we need. I know they've been speaking to you about how they would like to cover that. They're the professional firefighters, and as far as the safety of firefighting at the airport, I want to defer to them as much as possible. I can tell you that other airports, if you go to 20 different airports, you'll find 20 different solutions to the problem. St. George, for example, they just hire more people, and then they cross-train the airport staff to also be the firefighters. So they don't have a fire department presence. They would have maintenance people and those people cross-trained to do the fire. At other airports, they bring down one off-duty firefighter. At some airports, they staff up one station so that they have one person that's available to go to the airport. Our fire department has their own way of looking at that. All I can tell you is what the rules require. The rules require that we have one ARF-trained person within 3 minutes of anything that happens at the airport. And we can skin that cat in a lot of different ways. The safest way to do that is to bring down a fire crew. It's also the most expensive way to do that. If there ever was an accident, we would be really glad that we had 4 fully trained firefighters at the airport in that event. Other airports don't necessarily do it that way. All right. But as we get more and more flights and we're taking station 4 or whichever station's available down to the airport with a full crew of 4 guys for longer and longer, and starting in September, we're gonna have 3 flights on Sunday. That's a whole day. And that's a whole day for my guys too. Remember, we're doing this with 3 people. So we're down there too, Saturdays, Fridays, Sundays. We all have to be there. So the firefighting component can be done in a couple of ways or a mixture of those ways. And we're working with the fire department to try and figure out what is the best way to do that for the safety of the public, as well as the most cost-effective way for the airport. Did I tap dance around that enough?
No, that's good. We want a successful airport, we want a safe airport, and we want one that's also cost-effective. Costs money to provide that service.
It absolutely does. It costs money, it costs time, it costs, there are these benefit costs that we always weigh, and I can just say that in St. George is a good example of an airport that has just gone completely to, we're gonna have an ARF-trained guy there, but he's gonna be an airport guy. Ogden, while they still only have 2 flights a week, they're still bringing a full firefighting crew down every time. We're getting to a point where that's not going to be as feasible for us because it's a whole day, and to bring 4 people down when really we just need 1 becomes a little more difficult. Now I understand our fire crew's perspective. They don't want to just send 1 guy to the airport because if there's an accident, all that person's going to be able to do is spray foam and wait for the cavalry to arrive. And that meets the standard, but does that meet the higher ethical standard of providing safety? Those are the things we have to wrestle with and decide how we want to do it. Any other questions? Yeah.
So I realize this question is based on the utility infrastructure being in place, but what is the time frame for the phases? How many phases? You talked about phase 1. What does phase 1 look like? And what's the time frame where you actualize those, like the $425? Yeah. So I think it's the bay, the original bay that they're building.
Yeah, you're talking about a Duncan question. So I think either Dave or Bill would be better in answering that question than me. Okay. What the phases mean to me is I've got more ramp to plow. But they're a little more critical to everybody else. And also what it means to me is more people on the ramp, more people to badge, more people to keep track of, which all falls under our security purview. So a first phase would be, well, it's expanded quite a bit. I think they showed you the picture. Do you want to talk them through that, Bill, or do you want me to ham-handedly make the attempt, or? Okay.
Just along those lines for you too, is how does that putting that infrastructure in, how will that affect the airport flow as well? I believe it's on the Duncan will go on the east side, the southeast side, you said, of the airport property.
The
north, the southeast side is the terminal. The northeast would be where Duncan would be, right off the end of our primary runway, or right to the side of our primary approach. Right. What it does to the airport in the short term is again, other than giving us a lot more people to keep track of, which does increase our badging and security load, and giving us more property to maintain, more lights to keep track of, all of that stuff, which is significant. The good thing about this location from an airport standpoint is right now it's fairly isolated. It's surrounded by private property owners. So it doesn't necessarily do a lot to us other than making those private properties more valuable airport property at some point in the future, or more valuable property for any purpose because the infrastructure will be there that isn't there currently. You have a lot of vacant land. As the airport grows, that land's going to become more and more valuable for any type of development, and having that infrastructure will make it feasible to do so. Whereas if we just leave it the way it is right now, there's really not much we can do with the infrastructure we have down there. Does that help at all?
One other thing that I'm interested in is I think for our vision, we need to recognize what this vision is, because we are not trying to be a Salt Lake Airport, and we never will be a Salt Lake Airport.
Yeah.
What we have is the opportunity to make jumps to larger airports from this airport, which will make ours more viable. And I'm concerned that we think, oh, we're competing with Salt Lake, we're trying to beat them. We're not. It's a whole different thing.
No. Salt Lake is a hub airport for a major airline. We're never, I'm careful saying the word never, but it is highly unlikely in any of our lifetimes that we would ever have the level of flights in and out that Salt Lake has. Frankly, if Salt Lake was not a hub for Delta, they wouldn't have anywhere near the number of flights that they currently have. They're a hub for a major airline, and everybody feeds the hub. We're a spoke. And spoke airports, even in big cities, don't generate anywhere near the air travel that a hub airport does. So no, Salt Lake, we're not even in that market. We're not trying to become a hub for anybody because the hub system is kind of fading away. There's really only 4 airlines right now that are still using that hub and spoke model. So no, we wouldn't be anywhere near Salt Lake. A good example of what we would be trying to do would be Bozeman, Montana, Jackson Hole, Colorado Springs, and then if our population grows and our disposable income grows, something more like John Wayne in Orange County. We're looking at being that, not LAX. Okay, and there is a big difference. And those of you who have never flown into a spoke airport or never had that experience anywhere but Provo, do what I did. I got in my car and I drove to a bunch of them. So this is before we had commercial service. I went to Jackson Hole, I went to Bozeman, I went to Colorado Springs, I went to Centennial. Visited a lot of different airports to see exactly what we're looking at, and it is a very different situation than a hub airport. That help? Any other questions before I let Bill talk about phasing? Okay.
I was going to say the long international flights from Provo today are probably our clients. Because they'll take off and go to Brazil or Hong Kong or Europe from here. So phase 1, this is the north end of the airport, as Steve was saying. There's 45 acres here. Phase 1 is what you see in white. This would be the paint hangar, and that's the service center complex in the center. And we've got room here for, this is actually an older drawing, we've got room for 2 more large hangars to the south. They're showing 2 small hangars right now. So phase 2 would be additional paint capacity here, and then new maintenance capacity on down that direction. That answer the question?
Yeah, so in how many years, I mean, do you see this, the phasing lasting? How long?
Phase 1, we're estimating it's going to be in the 8 to 10 year bracket. By the time we get to year 8, we're going to be totally maxed out, maybe a little bit before that, but we'll be out of space and starting to plan the break ground for phase 2.
Will phase 1 be completed?
Phase 1, and depending on all these votes and the support from the community and the state, we're hoping to break ground next spring.
Takes a couple of years to build out.
Yeah, 2 years to build. So we're looking at late 18 at the earliest, probably early 19 to actually move into it.
This phasing would have nothing to do with, it shouldn't have any effect at all on our commercial opportunities, other than maybe enhance them.
Enhance them, yes.
Because it is isolated the way that it actually is a great location for this from a security standpoint and from a growth of our terminal. Because it takes a lot of the, well, I'll just say this real quick. What it'll do is take a lot of people who we currently have to badge to be in the secure area, which is all of those guys because they're right next to our secure area, puts them further away. TSA would love this because then we don't have as many badged people that can go in the secure area. We don't have as many people milling around in the secure area. It takes a lot of the pressure off of us from a security standpoint.
Steve, can you just orient me on this map? Where you drive into Millionaire? Where is that?
Oh, okay. We'd have to pull back a long ways to get you to there.
Oh, okay.
You have to go to.
It's
Do you have an airport map?
over here.
Okay. So this is north then?
This is to the far north, and our terminal area would be to the far south.
Okay.
So our other runway actually points due north. So due north goes like that way. So this is a little bit northwest, and then it sits right off the end of that runway.
Right up in the corner, you can see just a little clip of Center Street.
Yeah.
West Center Street, and this is the south edge of that storage complex that's up there with the gas station
So
sign.
we're still quarter-mile away from your current place.
Yeah, if you can pull up a Google map of the airport, I can show you where all this is.
Yeah, it threw me a little when north was left. So.
We try and do things parallel to runways when we do pictures, which does mess a lot of people up.
That's my problem.
What's there now? Is it, on the aerial I'm looking at, it looks like it's all been chewed up. Just
Well,
grazed
what's
over.
there right now is dirt that is sitting there to surcharge the ground underneath it and get our compactions up. And then also some of our leftover runway mill tailings are sitting out there right now. Yeah, can we get a little closer than that? Yeah. We're just being impatient. They'll get there.
Were you able to even get the actual ground?
Alright, now we're talking. Okay, so.
Oh, sorry, man.
No, you're good. If everybody can see it, I can just do it like that. Okay.
Stop. It's a little sensitive.
Okay, so right here would be where Duncan is going. And on an airport map, it's easy to remember because we have a runway 36, which is the same as a runway 0, which means this runway is pointing due north, exactly north, okay? So Duncan would be here. The area we've reserved for a terminal is down at this end, right here. We're currently doing airline operations out of the center, which from a security standpoint is the hardest place to do it, but it's the only place we can. So long-term, when we get Duncan and a lot of our employees down at this end, our terminal down at this end, security becomes a much easier task for us. That make sense?
Thank you.
I don't want to breeze by the local benefits, but I think a lot of them have kind of already been addressed as they apply both to the state and to the area. Just the two things I want to hit before we actually talk about the meat of this request, and that is the job creation and the investment that they're making at the airport is not insignificant. Right now, this is a farmer's field, this area right here. And before we took ownership, it generated very little taxes, and now it generates zero taxes. Again, this is not a retail deal. This is what in our profession we call pure economic development. Retail is really nice. I know that funds a lot of things, but that's all peripheral. It's jobs that drive the investment. Just really quickly, there's a reason why Nordstrom left our valley, is because there wasn't enough money here. Jobs like this bring higher incomes, which then brings some of those uses. And all those uses won't necessarily land in Provo, but because we have jobs, and that's what Provo has really focused on the last, well, as long as I've been here, the job creation, and that's what this is. And again, the city has not engaged in a lot of inducement type projects. Most of our growth in the job area has been homegrown. But this was one of those that was unique. It provided a niche, it provided some benefit, again, to the airport, but also to the local economy. And it's that job creation, the wages that go with that, and the investment. So very quickly then jumping to the actual heart of this request, Bryce, we go back to that spreadsheet. And then I asked Shane Winters to join me on some of this. So one of the questions that you may be asking is, wow, how come we didn't talk about this a long time ago? And the city actually did. As early as 2007, the city had issued a commitment letter to Duncan Aviation saying that we would provide utility and infrastructure, because we realized, again, if you were to remember the map that we just looked at, there's nothing there right now. The utility, the improvements just don't exist. The closest thing is Center Street. Some of those improvements even peel back to 3110. And so the improvements that we're talking about are roads, curb gutter, and then the utilities associated with that: water, sewer, storm drain, power. And so this is a laundry list of things that the city back in 2007 and then reiterated again in 2008, that these were things that Provo City was willing to do for Duncan Aviation. Back then, it was a generic dollar amount that we calculated based on a location and getting to another location for these improvements. And so at the time, it was estimated to be about $2.5 to $3 million the city was going to have to spend to make this project happen. Duncan Aviation had a basic site plan, and we had a basic location and some basic concepts. It's really been only recently, and now is the time to discuss what we're actually discussing today. Today is that appropriate time to say, okay, what are these improvements really going to cost? And so as we have met with Duncan, as we met with our own public works divisions, we've now been able to sharpen our pencil and say, okay, what are the costs of these actual improvements? And so if you could scroll all the way to the bottom, and Shane can talk about any of the specifics that you have questions on. So that number right there, 2.83 million is the request, and those include all the commensurate utilities and infrastructure to make this project work. The council should be also aware that the Provo City received an EDA grant to build the big apron out front. That's the big concrete that, if we could just toggle back to that site plan really quick. There, thank you. So all this area right here is part of the public ramp. In other municipalities and other jurisdictions, that is provided by the airport. Well, that piece of concrete's not sitting there today. That piece of concrete, talking about football fields and some of your earlier discussions, that's the size of several football fields. And it is how thick?
Dave, help me, 16 inches, 11 inches.
So it's a very thick piece of concrete. In fact, the grant allows us to build the concrete ramp. So the city was able to get a grant from the Economic Development Administration. It's a $7 million price tag. The feds are paying for half of it. Provo School District, Utah County, and Provo City, the tax increment, which was created. Dave, when was the tax increment?
2009.
So the project area was created in 2009. So again, this has been a series of decisions that have been made starting back in 2007. And today we're at that point to now make the decision to, hopefully make the decision to fund these improvements that will then bring the jobs, bring the capital investment. This has not been an easy task.
Can I jump in for one
Please.
second? I don't want to break your flow. But about this ramp also, he was very careful to point out this is a public ramp. I just want to say also, we've already put $1 million of FAA money into site and prep work to build this ramp. The reason we were able to get that $1 million from the FAA is because they realized that this public ramp space at the Provo Airport is really, really important. From time to time, we get overflow traffic or diversion traffic from Salt Lake International. When that happens, these are usually very large jets, 737, 757 size aircraft. We don't have a lot of places to park those as a diversion airport because they have to be on concrete or asphalt that is really strong. If we had additional concrete space, that also gives us the opportunity to be a better reliever for Salt Lake. So,
no, very good. So anyway, the improvements need to be funded. Wasn't easy. So what we did is, with the help of Public Works, I will have to say there was a little bit of arm twisting. I really am ashamed to say that. But they've been excellent players, and we have provided a package that was in your package or was in the SIRE program, so I believe you have that, on how we could fund it. We have another alternative that Dave Walter will talk about in a second to fund. But just going through that, and I apologize, I don't have this electronically, but you have it in your packets. The memo from myself to Mr. Parker, a page of text, and then on the back page, it breaks out
how the various sources of how this is being funded from the various funds. Some of it's being carried over from one year to the next.
We don't have that.
It's, yeah, it's,
Which one is it?
we do have, they're pulled up here.
We don't have it paperwise.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. I just assumed what was here was also in your, I'm not
In our
familiar.
electronic packets. I have seen, is that the one where you're taking from,
Yes.
like, the redundant line coming out of the canyon for fresh
Yes.
water?
That's it.
Yeah, okay, I apologize.
I've seen
I
it somewhere. I don't know
was
if
not
it's
familiar with
documents
the
or-
format. I assumed it was in the packet.
Is this it?
Yes, if you can go scroll down one page. Very good, right there. So this is how we were able to identify where the funding was going to come up with, and even with going back to our 2.8 number, there was a little bit in the storm drain that was still lacking, 82,000, and then the actual design work, which is another $250,000. Those ones that we were proposing coming from fund balance from the general fund. And I've asked Dave Decker to be here today if he could help just give the council a flavor of, we recognize that you just don't take the money and there's no consequences. This is what the municipal council does, is they work with the administration, they figure out what the priorities of the city and how to spend the money. And so Dave, if you could come forward at this time and the council has questions, or just maybe walk us through the page there and talking a little bit about each line.
Let me just go through some of the details on this and be able to talk about some of the project impacts. I'm going to start with some of the easier ones that are here to be discussed. The first one we're going to talk about is streets, and Dave Graves was heavily involved, also Shane Winters from Public Works. And as far as building the road, the entrance that goes into the parking lot off of Center Street, and I think it was good to see the bigger picture of the airport, so that you understand this is not the typical entrance into the airport. There's a brand new entrance that comes off of Center Street that's being built and designed, a parking lot. The funding for those items are coming out of, you can see the different, the 4 accounts, two sidewalk accounts, and then also 2 street accounts out of 2 different fiscal years. And Dave Graves was involved in this part of the discussion so that we didn't impact, we didn't feel like we overly impacted any of those accounts by removing those funds, but that's what the proposal is for funding the street improvements. As far as stormwater, Greg Beckstrom was approached, and we looked at options as far as funding of almost $200,000. It was about $180,000 of stormwater improvements, again, primarily on the street entrance and in the parking lot that's proposed. Greg felt like we had a couple of projects that have been completed that we could gather funds that have not been expended. Again, these are completed projects, not future projects, and we could gather enough funds for about $100,000. There's about $82,000 of stormwater improvements that could not be funded directly out of our stormwater utility fund. And as Dixon indicated, that $82,000, I believe the request is to fund that out of the general fund. And if you can pan down just a little bit, in wastewater, our funding, we've actually projected a lift station in that area, and this has been several years ago. We projected a lift station. We funded it in our capital improvement plan. We had $1.2 million for a lift station in the area. That funding is still in place. As we started looking at some site improvements, especially extending a sewer line to the west, and I can show you if you want on the exact site plan where that sewer line would go. We ended up being about almost $400,000 short of the funding that was originally requested. And our recommendation from Public Works is to take that out of fund balance. There's adequate funding in our wastewater fund to remove that $370,000. So our recommendation is to take that out of fund balance. There's also some design work right here. Again, Dixon indicated that Aviation would need for design on site, and we're recommending that that come out of general fund. The most difficult Dixon talked about some arm twisting that went on, and the most difficult one is in water. So if you can go back to the top of the page, we modeled several different fire flow and water line infrastructure needs at the airport. There's really not a lot of infrastructure on Center Street from 3150 west going west toward Utah Lake. We only have an 8-inch line. It's a single feed line. There's really not a lot of fire flow protection for residents, it's fine, but for commercial development that you're talking about of this nature, we don't have any significant lines in the area. So it requires a 12-inch line being brought in about midway down 3150 west. So if you can picture 3150 as you turn south going toward the traditional entrance into the airport, about midway down there's a road that comes off. There's only a few homes on that. We would install a 12-inch line on that road, and then at the end of the road cut through the field to the northwest up toward the site, and then loop back onto Center Street with a 12-inch line. That 12-inch line, you can see it actually doesn't identify the cost on this memo, but it's about $800,000. In the parking lot itself, there's a need for an 8-inch line that loops toward the building. It's a much smaller loop just inside the parking lot. Combined, it's about $1 million, $980,000, almost $1 million. And again, the most difficult funding scenario by far was the water situation. I've talked a number of times with the council how tight the funding is for water and water projects. Really the best solution that we could come up with, and the recommendation that we made to the administration, is to take these two accounts right here. You'll recognize, I hope you recognize these two accounts. These are savings accounts that we had set aside for reservoir and a redundant 48-inch line that comes down out of the springs, out of Provo Canyon. We're taking half, in both cases, we're taking half the funding in 17 for those, and the balance of it would come out of fund balance. We are, I recognize we're very short in fund balance. We have about $800,000 in fund balance in water, so it wouldn't deplete all of it, but it's a pretty healthy chunk, and that's the recommendation that we have as far as funding the specific needs. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Are we gonna get a lot of power revenue from this, or electricity revenue?
Yes, we did some analysis. Again, it's been a while since we looked at their power bill and did some comparisons, but it is significant. It comes back, there's a significant general fund component.
Contribute very little.
What's that?
Energy is contributing very little.
Well, in this case, a lot of the power infrastructure is already there because of the airport, so it's just a quick extension.
Why taking water when we have such a nice fund balance?
Well, we would need to.
That would be popular.
Yeah, and that's entirely possible. We could do an interfund loan and finance that and have that paid back over time, conceivably. So there's a variety of other choices. Dave will talk about one, but yeah, certainly doing some interfund financing, we could explore that as well.
I just hate to see that water.
Yeah, so do we.
And what does that do to we're doing this to not bond in the future. So does that require us?
It basically pushes us out about a year in terms of our capital improvement plan.
So 1 year.
Yeah.
You've been so positive, and power's just done really well.
Yes.
I would like to look at that.
We can sure do that.
So Travis will probably kick me.
Yes, he will.
Well, actually, they'll probably kick me, so it's
Your
okay.
gold-plated electric meter is now gone. So.
Does any of the costs on there include, does that already include in the land acquisition, rights of way, easements, et cetera?
We own the land,
It does,
so it'll
yeah.
just be leased to Duncan, so.
And this is a question maybe for Dave. We're not using any increment for this.
Using all the increment for the ramp.
Because that's where all the increment would go into the ramp. Okay,
Right,
to provide the match. Okay.
The ramp, is that the apron or?
Yes, same thing.
It's what Steve was talking about out in front. It's west of the building. Any other questions?
Yeah, but I think it'll be better to hear the other funding option.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so yeah, just to reiterate, all the increment is being proposed to go for the ramp. So we've taken the projections that we got from Mr. Prohaska and his staff in Duncan, and we estimate that we can get to the 3.5 that we need over a 20-year period. We've had preliminary discussions with the school district. They're supportive of this project. The other option that we have talked about a little bit is a Section 108 loan, and that is through the Community Development Block Grant Program. So the feds, because this one of the broad mandates that municipalities and other jurisdictions have under the CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Program, is job creation. So what this would allow us to do is to fund projects, and through our block grant allotment, we would use a portion of our block grant allotment to pay back the loan. We would get we'd get a loan guarantee, we'd be able to go out to the marketplace and get a loan and then pay back the loan through a portion of our block grant allotment. So over a 10-year period, we could pay it back without using up all of our CDBG for projects.
Could be an alternative to a general fund, use of fund balance. Again, it is a loan, it does have to be paid back. The good part is that it's paid back from an existing revenue stream. Now again, that does take it, but it does take away dollars from other potential CDBG uses. I'm just saying it's a trade-off, just like any of these other things we're talking about.
But it's a good trade-off.
Is there interest on that type
Yes,
of
you
loan?
would. Yeah, you would pay. There would be an interest, but it would be lower than, you know, it'd be like, I think the last time I looked, it was, I want to say just a point or so over prime, or the LIBOR rate, depending on which one they're using.
Can I ask you a question here? Yeah, I got a question. So at the bottom of the sheet, it says that the balance 332,000 could be out of general fund or the loan. Would you loan only that much, that small amount?
Probably.
Well,
Again, yeah, and again, there could be others. That's the essentially unfunded component. Now, again, we do, as Councilman Stewart's pointed out, we do take the water fund balance down to a level which is lower than we feel is acceptable. Again, we could use proceeds from a 108 loan to do that and allow the water fund to stay more whole than it has been. We could certainly do an interfund transaction of some kind with the energy fund that is sitting on $15 million worth of existing fund balance today. So again, there are a couple of different choices. I think the key thing was we wanted to come and share the numbers as we knew them today, provide some alternatives, listen to feedback before we put together the final presentation, which would include public hearing and an appropriation, transfer of project funds from one project to another, and bring that back for full council authorization. So
you would need motion today.
No.
Well, to move it.
We would like to move it forward so that Duncan
Right,
can conclude their arrangements with the state in terms of locking up their incentive. But the methods for doing that, we probably still have some time to do. Basically, we need to commit to Duncan that we are prepared to do this.
Do that today.
We need to do that in 2 weeks. So, from the standpoint of doing a commitment, approving a resolution authorizing a commitment to Duncan, we can still continue to work through the financing mechanisms as long as you're comfortable with where we're headed.
So also in the document that you now do have before you, sorry, I apologize I thought you had that. The precedent for using the 108 loan doesn't necessarily determine future practice, but it was used out at Mountain Vista to build the first road, and it was a $3.5 million loan. It was paid back early. We didn't necessarily save any money because when you do a 108 loan, you have to guarantee the investors that they get their expected rate of return. But it did allow for the improvements to be built. And when we built the improvements at Mountain Vista, that was the beginning of much of the investment that we see there today. Again, that's why the Housing and Urban Development recognizes it and authorizes its legitimate use of the funding for economic development, for job creation. And
I think we're telling the public that we're funding the infrastructure with the fee increases. I hate to use it for something else. I'd much rather it was a 108 loan.
okay, well, again, as Mr. Parker said, we just want to provide a variety of options and let you know there were several ways to to address this potential.
So how do we want to, as a council, discuss the options? Madam Chair. Work session, another work session?
Either way, I mean, if we moved it to a council meeting, we can always continue if we're not prepared to. Move on it.
I think from our standpoint, the critical path item is whether or not the council's ready to say this infrastructure subsidy we're okay with. The funding mechanism, I think we can take a couple more weeks on.
I'd like to make the motion so we can discuss it. We do in fact improve the funding.
Approve the funding.
Essentially, we'd write a commitment letter to Duncan, commits to these improvements. And we could put together a number of different scenarios if you'd like. We'll take bits and pieces of these and come back and have you take a look at those. We're perfectly fine with that. We do need to, I think we need to get a commitment ready for Duncan so that they can take that to the incentive board and lock in their commitment at the state level.
Clearly, to me, that clearly made the case for doing this, but it's just painful.
It is very painful.
You get there and it's just plain painful.
Yeah.
So, and I don't, yeah, and I think if we can find, yeah, it's not as painful there, depending on how much interest you pay and that kind of thing. And if we're confident we can find a way.
We can certainly run that scenario. And again, I would just mention too, the commitment of CDBG dollars, again, is not, and I'm not arguing pro or con, but it is not without risk because it comes off the top, the principal interest payment comes off the top of your CDBG allocation every year. So that would impact what we can do with social services. It would impact what we can do with non-social services. It can impact sidewalk programs and park acquisition and development, a variety of the things we use CDBG for. So, so it does do that. Again, we can also repay. We don't have to repay with CDBG dollars. We can repay with other dollars if we choose to along the way. So again, that becomes an annual budget consideration on the part of the council. But again, I think it's not a bad alternative, and it certainly does, as Councilmember Stewart suggested, as we've now just been through the rate adjustment process to provide capital needs and now pushing those, at least some of those out a year, not all, but some, does create a challenge for us for sure in the infrastructure funds.
And historically, 108 loans have been used exactly for this.
Yes, and again, Dixon pointed out the obvious one, which was for the initial, and again, we have 5 projects under construction right now and are creating Dixon, how many?
300-400 jobs.
300 to 400 jobs that led with that. And again, we've done EDA grants subsequently, and we've had other investments, but that really was kind of the kickoff for the ability to do what we've been able to do at Mount Vista. So it's not at all dissimilar.
With the infrastructure that we're putting in, what other types of things are we looking for out there? After we put that in, yes, we'll get Duncan. What other type of things can we be looking at that can take advantage of this?
Well, I think that the classic one is the sewer lift station, which actually serves a significantly larger footprint on the west side than Duncan Aviation. Opens the door, for example, for the John Dester project that's immediately north of Center Street. Again, it opens the door for additional future development out there, which we currently couldn't sustain because we just can't provide sewer service at that location. This 12-inch looped water line, again, it is predominantly for Duncan and largely, again, wouldn't be needed if it wasn't for the kind of development Duncan's doing, but it does, again, open an opportunity to improve some pressure zones and do some other things in the area. So the infrastructure investments, while we're talking about a kind of $4 million commitment, budgeted and unbudgeted at this point, there are corollary benefits, for improvements we won't have to do later for the next development. So.
Also, other infrastructure or other structures that happen in the airport in the future.
Yes.
That fire flow is not just unique to Duncan. It's going to be needed for our terminal, other things that are built at the airport.
So if we move this to the next council meeting, and if you could come back with the options sort of fleshed out a little bit. So if we went the 108 direction, what does that do to the other CDBG, and for how many years will they be affected?
We can sure do that.
So that we just kind of have a more kind of
we could do kind of a high, middle, and low option, and we can do something in between if that's comfortable. But yeah, we want to get you to a point where you feel okay about the funding mechanism to get there.
Would it be possible to put it on the next council meeting as well as the next work session meeting?
Yes.
We hear it both times, maybe give us more time to discuss.
Yeah.
The other quick thought on it is when asking for information, let's take a look at an interloan or inter-fund loan.
Sure.
As well.
Do that.
You know, if we're gonna borrow money, sometimes it's
Borrow
nice
some
to
from
borrow from
ourselves.
ourselves rather
Yeah,
than.
absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know,
we'll include that as well.
Travis is pretty tough.
He's not here, so we can talk about it.
Oh, do we have a second for the motion? For George's motion to,
I'll second it.
do you have the motion? I guess. we can do
Yes,
it
just to
second.
move to the next meeting.
Move to the next meeting and come back with some of
Come back with
those.
some additional.
We'll come back to work meeting then with some of the other options.
So just to elaborate on a point that George brought up, is on the surface of it, it has the appearance that we're taking some money that was allocated for like 48-inch transmission line or the reservoir, things that money that we're collecting from the public for one purpose, and then we're repurposing it. And we're comfortable with that, right?
I think the problem, they're not really comfortable. That's why I'd rather do a F1 hold or one way.
I'm kind of with Mr. Stewart on that one. I am, this is hard for me.
Yeah, it's hard for all of us. This was not our first choice for sure. Can we just verify, just for the benefit of the GOED and the EDC Utah, that the motion is to have a resolution to authorize the mayor to provide a commitment letter for the infrastructure financing? Okay, okay, just want to make sure that's the case.
Say that again.
That it would be a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign a commitment letter on the part of the city for the cost of the infrastructure we've defined today for Duncan Aviation. Does that get you there? Okay.
Yeah, and that being part of your motion.
That wasn't a motion.
It's
I just want to clarify it. make sure.
That's your clarified motion.
Don't get me started.
Okay. With the understanding that I'll come back with other options for financing, yeah. Okay, so, and there was a second,
Yes, and I.
Mr. Winterson, thank you. So those in favor? The voting is unanimous. In the affirmative with Mr. Sewell excused. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. The next item is a discussion on updating the explanatory text for the 2016 council priorities and this will be presented
Sure.
by
This is an item that we discussed 2 weeks ago. I think a majority of the proposed changes were fairly well understood. There was one sheet that we wanted a little bit more time to digest and hear from others, and that's the budgeting for priorities. However, that was the name of that. And since then, I believe the budget committee has met on it and has made some recommendations. I think that's where we're at on it.
Do we want to scroll down to the budgeting for priorities? That was the only one we were.
Yeah,
really
that was my
questions about.
recollection.
Because that was sort of wordsmithed by the budget committee and it was accepted by the council, so we want to make sure. So scroll down a little bit, the intent statement should be underneath the desired outcomes. Thank you there.
Do we have a version without the changes? Or I mean, with only the changes, sorry?
Something on the line sent out. So that the changes weren't included on the one on site, or I can pull up one on site if that's better.
This one,
The one on Sire, I believe, also shows us the changes.
Yeah, I still loaded this, but in issue 5. Essentially what we did was we removed the intent statements from the top so that it could be more informed with what you've done with the others, and we put it underneath in the desired outcomes. It was more of a desired outcome anyway. And I don't remember, what were the other changes? They're, were not significant. It was just
more formatting.
the formatting and making sure that those were still in there instead of the original.
You just go turn off changes, Bryce, so you can see the final version.
Yeah.
There you go. Show final.
You guys remember what were the other changes I'm trying to think now? Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
Can we go down a little bit, maybe just, yeah, right there.
You can go to the top, let's just read through it, and as I read through it, I'll figure out. I'll remember. Okay, so responsible government should be transparent and accessible by citizens while creating and maintaining balanced and sustainable financial plans and budgets. These financial plans and budgets should keep taxes and utility fees fair and competitive while still maintaining quality services and cost-effective management of infrastructure. Priority-based budgeting is a way for local governments to spend within their means by continuously focusing money on programs which receive results that are most relevant to their communities. Approved budget should clearly support the long-term city goals. And I think we changed council goals to city goals. Was one of the changes. And then these are our intent statements. Shall recognize a structurally balanced budget initiative while ensuring that annual budgets are balanced. Strive also to balance projected long-term revenues and expenditures. And the general fund capital maintenance funding. The city should define an appropriate level of capital maintenance funding for all city facilities. And the third one was framework for fee structure and evaluation of fees. To the extent feasible, the city should strive to have each service paid for by the beneficiaries of the service. So we just moved those under desired outcomes because they are more outcomes than an introduction. And the budget in the following format, this is the same as we had before: a description of the programs and their intended function, a description of how the program furthers city goals, the actual FTE personnel dedicated to the program in the past, the current FTE personnel, and proposed FTE for the next budget cycle. History of expenditures and proposed budget for the program, historical projected revenues. The program will generate historic and projected revenue sources for the program, information documenting the achievement of program goals and contributions to the city goals. An assessment by the administration of the relative importance of the program in achieving each city goal. Those were all the same. And the indicators, budget updates and interim reports that include actual FTEs, expenditures, and updated information on contributions to city goals. Provo 360 implementation that is capable of producing the necessary reports.
And I'd like to take a couple minutes on a couple of these, and this is, we got back to the budget committee. And I am personally still struggling with an assessment of the administration of relative importance of each program. That changes every 2 years. And are we trying to memorialize what this council wants by having that last statement on there? Or are we giving other councils the opportunity to weigh in? And are we setting, I'm struggling with that because that's a heck of a lot of work.
It shouldn't change every 2 years because
Oh,
the
absolutely.
city goals are up top where you have the goals. They come from Vision 2030. If you scroll up a little bit.
Okay, and that's,
City.
but if we're assessing each one, an assessment by the administration each year as part of a budget
It's
presentation.
more of a review.
They're
Once
doing
you
that
make the
anyway.
initial assessment, you just review year after year based on how things change. You don't have to start from scratch.
They're essentially doing that anyway.
And that's
They're always.
And I agree with
They're
that.
always saying how this ties into our city goals, how this getting us where we want to go.
And if we're basically doing that, I'm just concerned that as I hear Larry talking about this, he says we need 2 or 3 more people in our budgeting department to be able to do the things that we want, that I see here, and that's where I'm confused.
But implementing this, I think is gonna take some time.
Well, I agree with the
And
time.
effort, and I think the finance department, they seem to be running pretty lean.
And I don't question that.
I think Dustin took the place of, I don't know, did
Denise.
Devin and Denise, or just Denise?
Just Denise.
Just Denise, who took Devin's place?
But what?
I don't know, he seems to be doing the lion's
He's
share.
doing very well.
Yeah.
What my concern is I'm just not sure what we're asking to do this. What does this mean to me? I don't understand. Yeah, we're doing it already, so why do we need 2 or 3 more people, and what are we asking for?
So you're asking that, but is unclear also to the administration what that means?
I think that we've expressed from the beginning our hesitancy to some of the things you're asking for. And I don't think that's been resolved with this document.
Can you explain what's still unclear?
What is budgeting for priorities?
What is it?
Yeah. So I've heard that it's everything from what Park City is doing to this whole different array of things, and I'm not sure I understand what the council views as budgeting for priorities.
When I read this document, at least the way it's been changed, it's not so much the council is ever changing priorities, but it's the city's long-term goals that are.
That's the end outcome, and I think I understand that. But does the council have the paradigm that we'll be doing this the way Park City's been doing it?
So are we on the same page?
Yeah, even amongst yourselves. I don't know. I haven't heard that discussed. So I don't know fully what you mean by budgeting for priorities.
And I think that's some of the confusion that I've got. I just don't, I'm still not sure what we're asking for.
I think for me, it's knowing, being able to tie our budget to our end outcomes. And that's how we move toward our goals and our priorities, right? So if we have these long-term city goals, are we moving in that direction? And when you break down each department by program, you can see where the money is going, and then you can see where the value is placed in those programs.
But those programs are so different.
And is that, and I think that the administration probably does this anyway. I mean, I think you almost have to, when you put a budget together, you have to decide, put importance on certain programs within a department and decide where you're going to put the funding within departments when you propose a budget to the council. I don't know.
I don't think we view programs as cleanly cut as you're describing. Police department's a good example where a school resource officer could be working on an investigation, could be working on high school, traffic stops. And it's much more complicated to bifurcate all of those activities into a program, and then the ebb and flow of those programs typically is left to the chief about how much staff he needs in each one of those. And so I think what we have felt good about is a moving in that direction. I think we've been very positive about identifying some programs, even in the budget we just approved, and more than we had in the past. And I think we've indicated that we're happy to keep moving in that direction. I think the speed might be frustrating to the council. We've talked a lot about some of this being dependent on 360 and realizing that's a couple of years away. So I don't think you're feeling, we don't want you to feel pushback from us about a move in this direction, and exploring what it means as we're moving there and how we look at programs once we actually see some of the difficulties with programs. I don't think you'll find us resistant to articulating how those programs reach city goals. I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. But I think you will sense a hesitancy to go too fast or to move to a model that's just totally different than the way we're budgeting, which we view the Park City model.
Just another thought. Sometimes the things that we put on our wish list are, like we did this year, we have things that we wanted to accomplish. How do our goals and priorities line up with the established long-term city goals? You know, it just depends on how you want to look at things. I don't want to diminish what we're trying to do, but I can understand the frustration of the administration. And so if we say that we want to have better zoning compliance, how does that fit in with the existing goals of the city? And I think it does. And I think we have a responsibility to consider and articulate how our goals fit in with the long-term existing goals, like Vision 2030, the general plan. And if we have a goal that is just kind of anomalous and outside of that, but still important, and everyone agrees it's important, I guess I'm not sure how you deal with that, but a lot of what we do is hopefully within the things we're already trying to accomplish as a city.
I think that there are times where a proposal comes to the council and we're asked to appropriate money for, you know, certain things. And it's hard to compare because things aren't broken down into programs. It's hard to compare. Where does this fit in? Where is this on your list of priorities? And Mayor, you've asked, you know, in the past, where does this fit in, you know, in your priorities? And it's hard to know if you don't know
how things are broken down of a level of importance within departments. And when they are broken down in level of importance, it's a lot easier to say, you know what, some of these along the bottom, they're kind of in the same boat. Do we like what we have? Does the community like what we have? Or is this better and should we substitute it? But we don't really have that opportunity to do that right now. It's so hard to do right now because we don't know what level of importance these different programs are within the departments.
But who's setting those priorities, Kim?
Well, if we're going to appropriate, I'd like to know what I'm appropriating for, and what that, and in turn, what does that remove, or what does that take away from? Or
so
kind of like today, you know, I want options. You know, I want other options. I want to know what the priorities are.
And the challenge is, are these my ones? Are these the administration's priorities that we're now removing? Are they my options that I'm removing?
If we know what the departments, what their preferences are, what things are like in level of importance and how they're moving towards city goals, it's a lot easier to do. But when we don't even have that sort of breakdown.
Don't we have that every year when they do that? Because they fund the ones that they feel are most priority, that have the highest priority.
And how do those relate to our goals? How do those relate to the end goals? How is that moving us toward the end goals? And I don't know. I don't see that. I know the administration, that's what I'm saying. The administration probably already has a handle on that, but I don't feel like I have a good handle on the level of priority within the departments. And when we do have to make these decisions, I don't feel like I have a good enough handle on where does this rank?
But I sit with Travis Hansen, and I sit with Dave, and I sit with, and they have all three different priorities on what they're doing because of the focus that they've got. And for me, so is it me that's going to make that decision and say, well, I think that the water line is the most important? Well, actually, I think that Scott's Pond is falling in. Maybe he needs that $135,000 to fill in that pond. Am I setting that priority, or
you're making the decision?
I'm making that decision.
On where that money goes. Yeah.
And so we do that.
The majority of the council.
And so do we look at every program and do we prioritize? That's what I'm saying. Why are we asking the administration if we're setting the priorities?
No, we're asking the administration, the departments to prioritize their
and we're saying whether they're right or wrong.
Programs. No, we're just saying we have to make tough decisions, and it's nice to know what they prioritize, top to bottom, And when we are doing things that are going to affect the bottom line, it's nice to know what those are. When we're making a decision, how does that affect these different departments? What does that affect, and how does it affect them?
I'm sorry, Dave being so patient here raising his hand, but I think that they do that every time they do it, give us a budget. They are prioritizing, and then we as a council are saying, well, I can see this is on the bottom of the list, and I like one over here a little bit better.
And I guess as a council, we came together and we decided what those end goals coming from the community, what we're hearing from the community, what their goals are, what they really, really want to have happen this year. And at the end of the year, I'd like to be able to look back and say, you know what, these were the things that our community were asking for, and this is what we did to get there, and these are the things we were able to accomplish this year to help the community accomplish their goals. And I think we can do that when things are broken down within the programs. We are not debating so much on what's more important, because we kind of already have that priority set. It's hard. Initially, it's really hard to get all that done, but when you have that, it makes your decision making much more easy and more efficient down the road, because you've already made those, you already have those priorities from the departments, you already have the administration, you understand what their priorities are.
And again, that changes every 2 years.
No, not necessarily.
If I could just step in real quick to kind of maybe refocus this just a little bit, and I think this is a very, very important discussion that's happening right now, but so the purpose, just kind of review, the purpose of this discussion, of this item is we set out 9 priorities at the beginning. We created these priority sheets, and we didn't have a lot of time. There was a lot that was going on, and we approved them in a certain state. I don't know how well that they were really broadcast to the broader community. We had an opportunity to broadcast them, make them part of, or at least refer to them in the budget that is now out. And so the idea was, now that we're going to put them online, we want to polish them up a little bit. I think our discussion now is more on maybe the merits of the budget to priority, and less on, you know, what needs to be done, or do we want to clean up the sheets before we post them online. We just entered the second half of the year, and I think not only could the sheets be a good tool to communicate our priorities to the rest of the public, but it's also, you know, now might be a good time to say, okay, here's the 9 priorities, here's what we were hoping to accomplish. Where are we at? Are we halfway through? You know, and so I think these are a good way to be a milestone and to kind of check ourselves on this. So we're having a good conversation on you know, budgeting for priorities and the merits but maybe for the rest of the discussion, maybe we could focus more on what do we want this sheet to look like, and then we can schedule a broader discussion on budget to priorities as its own item to move us forward, because the budget's done for this year, but I do think we need to start now for next year, so we get closer, you know, and then that can be part of working on this priority. But if I propose that we keep this discussion to more of formatting this sheet, if that's agreeable to everyone.
There's a lot on every one of these sheets that we could get stuck in the minutia of. And I think that the mayor asked some good questions, and the discussion at the table are some good questions for the council to resolve. On this one specifically, I think that there's some work to be done, and perhaps some considerable work, because right now when you take your budget monies, they're already kind of prioritized, but they tend to be prioritized kind of the way things have been done historically. What I'm hearing from council is a desire to move in a new direction with it, and that's going to take some time to get the priorities set and clear. This is just a first stop along that way, and there's going to have to be a lot of work to do. And I think that when you're setting your priorities, it's going to be a combination of council and the administration kind of figuring out how it's going to work and how realistically it can happen. But it's not going to happen overnight. This document isn't going to give you the full answers. It's just going to point you in the right directions.
My preference back 3 months ago or whatever, my preference would have been that we would have a priority budget to priorities, which would have been to look at the budget to priorities principles, and whether that's a budgeting for outcome, which is a very specific program that actually Quirk Cities is a slightly different one. It's not actually the budgeting for outcomes program, but there's these different systems that all kind of fall under these things. And I would have preferred something to say, you know, budgeting for priorities is a best practices, and it has these advantages, and the priority for the council is to study this and work with the administration to develop a plan going forward on how we can work these principles into our budgeting process. And keep it at a higher level rather than, you know, there are some fairly specific, you know, we want to see this, we want to see this, we want to see this. And to me, that these would be maybe more what we would get at the, you know, that maybe the desired outcome would be a plan and list out the things we want to see rather than listing them out here. But with that said, we did approve this language 3 months ago, and basically I'm just proposing that maybe we just format it a little bit, get it down to one sheet so it's easier for the public to digest. And then we can, just because it's a priority doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do everything that's on there. We can evolve as we study these things. So I guess my proposal would be, you know, we may have to cut a little out of some of the first paragraph or whatever that we just added that gives some background or whatever we need to do, but just tighten it up, make it nice and polished so it's presentable to the public and move forward.
And I think I'm less concerned about a page, having it fit all on a page, because depending on format and font and size or font size, I mean, you know what I mean? It can be a page or it can be a page and a quarter. I'm less worried about that. If it's in the general area where it's not so overwhelming that people are just not even going to read it, you know, I believe it's going to be concise, but I'm less concerned about having it be one page. If we're worried about one page, then I would just take out the caption at the top that takes a third of the page and just have budget priorities there, and then have all the other core values and Provo and city goals at the very top for all of it. And that way you could keep it to a page, right? Instead of having this a third of the page be the title, right? I think that would be an easy way to put it on there, because I think what's important is the text, what's in there, what we've agreed upon, like you said, what we've already sort of agreed to.
Maybe I'm not very good at wordsmithing or linguistics, but quite frankly, when I got the detail for the budget, I knew what we were budgeting for, what priorities. For example, in policing, I can see, and I don't want police to change what they did before, because you could look at community policing, you could look at traffic enforcement, you could look at accident. That's budgeted priorities for me. If I have the figures to see where the money is being allocated by department, by program within the department, I can approve a budget to priorities, because it literally shows me the priorities that the budget has. So I'm not sure it's that complex. I refer to the Mayor and Wayne. For me, the detail is all I needed. Once I had the detail in the budget, I could tell, I could say, well, I think we're spending too much of community policing, we should spend more on traffic enforcement. That's where I can make some changes. And without the detail, you can't make changes.
I agree with that point. I think sometimes we're talking theoretical, and it's nice to talk about real examples. The goal should be greater accountability so you can reach those conclusions, and transparency. Specifically, we had Mike Rohn asking some pointed questions about our neighborhood program budget. How much? What's it used for? And I think we can do better in that regard, so specifying what we're going to be using, how much we're going to allocate for the neighborhood program. Are we going to send people back to NUSA conferences like we used to? So when he asked, you know, how much is being spent or what's it being spent on, and if we were covering some costs just out of office accounts, then we need to be more specific so that someone can say, yeah, every year we spend this amount of money on the neighborhood program and it goes for these purposes. That's transparency. And there should be a goal articulated. I mean, why do we have the program and why do we train people and send them back to conferences? And lastly, if we have the detail we need, we can see how our expenditures are furthering the goals, the long-term goals of the city and the short-term goals of the council. So yes, we have short-term goals because we're short-term. But then we have Vision 2030, the general plan, we have a long-term vision that we should be working towards, even though we have some short-term things that come up along the way.
But you think about your short term, and they're largely constituent voter, right? I mean, and those kind of things are important to the community right now. So if they're short term, they're important right now. And if they're, they're short term and long term, they're things that are going to take years to do. But it seems like they're constituent either way.
Those are the best times. We're not making the constituents happy. And some of the priorities this year, like zoning compliance, is actually a very long-term problem in the eyes of some of the public. And yet I think it's also, you could find it in the general plan and Vision 2030 that it's a long-term goal. There's just this disconnect that we haven't been achieving a consistent amount of enforcement to be effective.
So I might suggest that we, today we're looking at formatting, and I think Mr. Harding makes a very good point that let's focus on the formatting of what we've already approved and just make sure that we're good with, if there were changes of words, because sometimes word changing can change the document from what the original intent was. So if there are any concerns about that, let's get those out there. And then every work session, I think we should pick one of our priorities, and I think we should discuss that priority for a little bit of time and see how are we doing on this particular priority so that we can mark our progress throughout the year. And we just schedule that and for each work session have one discussion or one more if you want, but at least one discussion on one of the priorities that we're moving forward and have reports back from the committees that are working on that and just an update on how that's going so that as we move forward, we're working on each of these.
I think that's a great idea. I support that. I do think hearing you talk about this, I think there may be just a little bit difference in expectation of what these sheets are. For me, this was the council picked 9 areas that we want to work on. And these are the 9 areas and just some background on it where again, what was written, and I kind of resisted and fought this, I think, 3 months ago, how specific, how detailed, how specific and what the wording was. I think the reason that the top third or top 25% of the page is this was specific, was specifically purposefully done in order to kind of keep that space for the rest of it shorter, again, to kind of keep it focused and brief, so it becomes easier to scan through. If we, to me, this is almost like a budget intent statement with some of the stuff that went in here, and I think so.
If you remember when we did the original one, it wasn't as involved, but the mayor asked for more specificity, so we met with him and we added some specifics to this. And so I think too that as we're drafting these, they need to make sense to the administration, and if there are questions like today from the administration, then we need to dive in a little deeper and make it a little more specific. And if it goes beyond a page, but it provides more specificity for the administration, I think that's important, so they understand exactly where we're at.
And I think that specificity could come through the committee meetings. I do feel strongly that if we can keep these to a page, and what's there will allow it to be much more functional for the public who are just trying to understand what is it that the council is trying to accomplish here.
Mr. Strachan?
I think these documents are meant to be a broad stroke at what you want to accomplish. You're absolutely right. If you want to get into the detail of it, those come at other meetings. So council had made some changes to this. You had proposed, Councilor Harding, you had proposed some changes to this. I think the question, if I were asking the question, it would be to council, with the changes that have been added or subtracted from this, does this fairly represent what you as a council want to do and to put forward as your priorities? If it is, up and down motion and vote on this document is all you really need. And then as you go forward, as Chairwoman Santiago said, we can talk about this at every work meeting, pick a subject and rotate through or whatever, and work on them. But as a statement from council of what you want to accomplish, does this accomplish the statement part of what you want to do? Not necessarily every single little detail that you want to, that has to be done to get there.
You're saying, as we go forward and talk about this, we would be, in essence, fine tuning and reiterating and understanding better.
Sure.
So in theory, something could change.
Yes, but you wouldn't do it every time. You might not change anything. You might decide that, okay, this is the high level, and now in terms of actual accomplishing it, these are the directions you're going to come, and that's going to be part of your policies, et cetera, et cetera. This is really, as I understood it, from council's retreat, was meant to provide a very high level direction to the administration and to yourselves as a council as to where you want to go. And if these statements accomplish that, then accept it the way it is and start implementing it in the rest of the things you do.
I'm comfortable with it with a high level, but with a lack of understanding of what that high level means when we get down to the bottom lines with it. So that's my only concern.
Looking at adult sports, how much we're spending and how much we're getting into, it's not high level, but it could be a discussion.
It could be a discussion.
It could be discussing. Those are the kind of things on priorities you can discuss individual items within individual budgets that you have individual council members have a concern about.
I fully agree with that, but I don't think that adult sports needs to be listed in here.
Oh, no, I'm just saying as we
Right.
during the year, during our work sessions, we could take, just like we have on fees, we could take individual parts of the budget and give the administrations the direction of what we feel comfortable with for the next year.
But only if you have that detail.
Right.
And I would suggest that you have the budget committee, and maybe a motion with the budget committee look at it. We're supposed to have the 25 fees quarterly, so we will have to, recommend that they look at those before they come to the council, so they can have a recommendation there too. But also be looking, as we're hoping to get involved in the budget process earlier, having the budget committee be involved in that.
You can't really work the priorities unless you work with detail. And once you work with detail, then it's pretty easy to start discussing priorities.
Getting the detail and then bringing it back to the full council, so the council is engaged the whole way, so it's not just 6 weeks, in May.
Because your base budget usually is the next year's budget. I mean, it changes very little. And so that really gives you an idea of what your new budget's going to look like.
Yeah.
And so you could give direction to the administration on specific items that anyone in the council wanted to bring up, they discuss. And then we can get a consensus for next year. If everyone feels comfortable with adult sports being funded like it is, with revenues and then general fund contribution, then we're fine.
So to move this forward, I'll make a proposal for discussion, and that is to approve it as the latest draft, with the exception that the section under in order to achieve this priority, we want to see a budget. Oh, is that, I can't tell if that's stricken out.
Budget priorities or another?
No, just budget to priorities.
You talking about deleting something from that text?
Yeah, the section, right, don't move it anymore. The last section there, a budget in the following format. I propose we take that out, not to diminish anything that's been done, but that I think that level of detail is beyond the scope of this document. Now, because it's taken out doesn't mean that it's not discussed or that it's erased or anything. That's still part of moving this priority forward, but it just would not be in here because that level of detail is beyond what I would argue the scope of this document.
Well, and it's not noted anywhere else right now. And it was something that the administration already passed for more specificity, so I would.
Can I ask the administration if you would be comfortable if we remove that from this goal, from this priority sheet?
I'll just tell you, my first impression is, I think the council staff needs to do most of that. I don't think that's an administrative request, some of that.
I think you could, I think to be fair, I think you could, and to borrow from kind of his procedures, you could just move to delete that whole budget under the following format, and then turn it over to the budget committee or your council staff or whoever you want, and we could work on that, because that really that section there gets into how do you want your budget presented, and it's a little more specific than the rest of the document. And I think if you wanted to have that and have that communication conveyed to the administration, just do it as a simple motion. We'll send them a letter with that. And then as far as the rest of the document, accept it as your statement of priorities and move forward. But then by doing it in the 2 steps, you have communicated this is what you'd like to see in a budget in the format. And then we can work on it as we go through the process of establishing the budget for next year.
And that is what I'm proposing.
And I'm good with that. If that's a separate motion and it's part of the motion, so it is.
Yes.
It is a full,
So if I can paraphrase what I hear is someone moves to delete the section starting with a budget in the following format and all the bullets under that, and communicate that to the administration as a direction toward next year's budget presentation, right? That would be your motion.
So my motion is that we accept the new priority sheets as it's currently formatted in the latest revision, with the exception that the section under budgeting to priorities, section starting a budget in the following format, and all the bullets underneath, and that section will be discussed further by the council with the idea that maybe we would.
Yeah, so procedurally, the way you'd want to do this is a motion to delete that from the document. And then, and maybe some direction where you want it to go, right? So to delete that section of budget in the following format, all the bullets, send it to where? The committee, the budget committee, or council's work session?
This has been through the budget committee.
This is the budget committee.
Okay, so if that.
And the council already approved this too, so
Yeah.
I mean,
With that document in there?
Yeah, that's all been approved by the council the first year. So, I'm fine with taking out that section and just sending it as if we want to make a formal, request to the administration. If you want to take that out, make a formal request to the administration. We've already kind of sent it. I mean, we've already done it, right? We've already approved this document. So we can send that as a reminder of what we've already asked them to do and take it off this sheet. I'm fine with that.
Okay, so that's my motion. With the direction, I'd like to discuss it as a council, maybe in another work session.
Before it gets sent to the administration.
Well, it's already been said. It was already part of.
So the motion would be to delete the section of budget in the following format and on all the bullets under it, and to forward to council for further discussion. End of motion.
Yes.
Following motion would be to adopt the council priorities as amended and to publish them. Clean up the language of that.
So I'll do that first motion.
And I think that was my whole point in saying that we could we'll bring these priorities to the discussion, but I'm hoping we can move forward and implementation, actually moving forward with these priorities as we go, so that we at the end of the year can say, these are the priorities, this is where, what we were able to do this year to
I would tell you as your staff that I would be very comfortable with that portion out, understanding that this is where you want to go. And then in terms of the actual procedures of how to get there, that's the work that we effect together as a leadership.
Let's state what motion I have. David Harding moved to accept the new priority sheets as currently formatted with the exception of the section titled A Budget in the following format and all the bullet points underneath, and that that section will be discussed further by the council and also sent to the administration as a formal request.
Yeah, it's already been formally requested, so I think, yeah, I would like to reiterate that that's still a formal request, and then we'll have that discussion in a future work session anyway. We'll be discussing each of these priorities anyway in a future work session.
So if we formally sent that list, did we get a formal response? I don't know. We've had discussions, but was there a written response?
Yeah, it was the budget document.
That's a good point. I clarify something. But Dave, maybe, I don't know if I'm misunderstanding. My understanding of what you said is that you would like there to be a work session discussion of that list before it's resent again.
Yes, yeah. Because I think this was already there when they were preparing the budget document. I think we discussed it, we approved it as part of this fairly large discussion, multiple work sessions, and we kind of did it all together. And so, and my understanding is we would then be coming back and working on these 9 priorities throughout the year. And so I would like to see that discussion on this priority at a future date. And it doesn't necessarily, I don't think it needs to go to the administration immediately because we're now talking about for the next budget. So I would like to have that discussion now, whether we send it to the council, or sorry, send it to the administration and discuss it, or we discuss it and then send it. I don't really mind either way, because if we do decide to make changes, we could always send the new things after we've had that discussion. I'm not too worried about that.
And it's already been sent, so I mean,
Yes, yep.
And whatever changes we would make would be for the next fiscal year if we're gonna make changes.
And then we
So I guess
can-
that's what
we
I'm
can
saying, is it's not gonna be any
suggest-
different than the other priorities that we're going through one by one, because we'll be, making recommendations based on the priorities as we discuss them, and then we'll be discussing them at regular intervals. If you wanna do it at a date certain, we could say, this specific date, maybe
I'll
earlier
leave
than
that-
later.
I'd prefer earlier than later, but
And I
I'll
think
leave
the
it up
budget
to
committee, I think
leadership.
we have felt that way too, that this discussion needs to happen earlier than, sooner than later, because we really want to get going for next year, so I agree.
So I just said, and send to administration reiterating it as a formal request.
I'm comfortable with that, the wording of the motion in that way.
So what I'm hearing is that even though we have this list here, it's not completely agreed to, or the administration's not completely happy or comfortable with everything on that list. And we requested and we got the budget back, and the budget, you can say, is the response. So what I would like to see is a report card where we look at the budget in light of these requests. Maybe the committee does that and say, the budget fell short or fulfilled or exceeded in all, line by line. And then when we find some area that is a problem, let's talk about it.
Okay. So do you want to make that motion? I see this being a multi-level motion.
Can we, let's finish his, can we vote on,
We don't have a second then? Okay, so. Is
Well,
there a?
I don't know.
It's just
That's a comment that as we go forward and have this discussion, I would just like to see that we, look at the budget we just got back and say, okay, is there correlation? And if we're needing changes or improvement based on our last budget, let's look at that so that we know what we need to ask the administration specifically going forward for the next budget. Because if they're already complying with a number of things, then let's focus on what's an issue, whatever that is.
And that's for a request for the budget committee,
Yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah.
So we can make that either part of this motion, or we can make it a separate motion. What would you recommend?
Well, I mean, I don't know that it needs to be either. I think it's,
Okay.
I wouldn't make it part of this motion, because I think this motion's already complicated.
Okay.
So I guess I would say if, as the chair of the budget committee, you want to just respond to the comment by saying we'll do that, then I think it's done. If you need to know if the whole council wants the committee to do that, then I would ask for a motion, but I'd vote on his first.
Okay. So your motion is to accept the priorities as written, and there were no other changes from last time other than the budget priority document, right? Did I?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't get any changes.
Okay. And then, and we just read the,
Okay, David already moved to accept the new priority sheets as currently formatted with the exception of section, a budget in the following format and its bullet points underneath, and that the section will be discussed further by the council in a work session, and it will be sent to the administration reiterating it as a formal request. I might reword a couple of those words there, so they know what it is, so I'll do that.
Did your motion anticipate then that you were actually deleting those elements out of there?
Those will be removed from the priority sheet, but not from the discussion.
Yeah.
No, I understand that, I understand. I see those as procedure, I see everything else on that document as policy.
Yeah.
Right? So I would use, with the exception, kind of leaves it open, I would be just very clear, delete that section.
Okay.
Accept it with the amended.
Okay.
Okay, so, all right. Okay. Is there a second? Motion? Mr. Richardson?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Voting is unanimous in the affirmative with Mr. Sewell excused.
And so with that, we should be able to get that up onto the website.
This week.
Awesome.
Right, this week?
Thank you for your work on that. Appreciate.
Thank you for the give and take. I appreciate that too.
Then next item of business is discussion on council committees, and this is a short discussion. We had a couple of requests, one with the ad hoc housing committee. We had a request from Mr. Van Buren to make Mr. Connect the chair of that committee for some scheduling purposes. Did I say that correctly? Okay. And so we just needed to bring that back to the council when we're changing the chair of the committee or members of the committee. We just need to bring it back to the council for approval. So if there are any questions or concerns with Mr. Connect being the chair of the housing committee, he is lots of background and has been very involved in our discussions. Wholeheartedly supported. And the fact that Mr. Van Buren is doing a great job too, but he's really scheduling is not working that great. So if there's a motion along those lines to make Mr. Connect the chair of the housing committee. Mr. Motion, thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Stewart, thank you. All in favor? So in the affirmative with Mr. Sewell excused. And then the development approval process review committee, we also have to change there as well for similar reasons to Van Buren's name set down in that committee and open it up to the other council members, and Mr. Connect was kind enough to offer to become part of that development review committee. Is that?
Yeah, I don't know how, but earlier in the year, I just saw that on my schedule. I thought, oh, I'm supposed to be there, and I showed up, and it worked out, and I just kept coming.
But we only had 3 there, right?
Well, this last time, I was the only one there.
Oh, okay.
And for 5 minutes, and then Dave Sewell came.
Okay.
So he was the only official person that I stayed, and it all worked.
Yeah, well, and so I appreciate this is sometimes more than a full-time job for us, and so I think, if we're able to help with committees, that's very much appreciated. If you can't serve on a committee, that's also very, understood. So anyway, if there are any questions about the changes, please. So if not, we'll go for a motion to Mr. Connect.
I move to add Mr. Connect to the committee to replace.
And is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Richard, Mr. Development. Okay, and all in favor? And voting is unanimous, no affirmative. And Mr. Sewell is abstaining. And then this last item is just a status update on the commercial trampoline gym facilities. As you'll remember, we met with the Orem City Council. I think it was the first time we discussed this actually as a council, but the trauma surgeons from Utah Valley Hospital approached me and asked about some regulations for these trampoline gyms. They were currently regulating, just self-regulating, and they were seeing an alarming number of injuries and severity of injuries. So the kinds of injuries they were seeing were more in line with high-speed crashes. And so they had approached the health department to look for some regulations there, and they were working on regulations, and then they ended up just getting tabled. Had a hard time coming to an agreement, from what I understand, on regulations, and so they were just tabled. So we have met a couple of times, and Mr. Jones has been our scribe for putting together some legislation, and it's been really helpful. We've had the owner of one of the trampoline gyms, and she's like I guess she's the manager, the owner and manager there. We have the police, or the fire chief. We have Chief Jolly there till he retired, and now Chief Augustus is there, giving input on the emergency side of it, you know. And then we have from the health department, the representative from the health department that came, and also who else am I missing? The surgeons. Yeah, it's both my stakeholders. Sorry, it's the line around blank right now.
Council staff.
Oh, Patty Cross is the health department. She's the health promotion director at the health department. So we've all given input on the regulations. We kind of use the health department's regulations as sort of the bones of the legislation, and added to from the different groups that were there. As soon as we're done, I believe we have a little more information that they're going to be getting to Mr. Jones on Friday, and by Tuesday we're hoping to send this to a father of a young man who was paralyzed in an accident at one of these trampoline gyms, and he's kind of become a self-educated expert because he's done a lot of research on trampoline gyms, and we're going to send it to him sort of as fresh eyes and let him look at it and see what he thinks from a citizen's perspective. And then when he's done giving recommendations, and we've talked about that, then we'll send it to the mayor and get his feedback from the enforcement side and the logistics, the things that he'll have to deal with, and get his feedback on the legislation. And hopefully we will be able to bring this to the council for discussion in August sometime. It's a tight timeline, but we're hoping to get this before you soon. We just want to give you an update of where we're at, and answer any questions if you have any thoughts. There is one gym coming online in University Avenue. I'm not sure when they're going to be opening their doors, but we just feel like it's really important. I personally feel like it's really important to have all of the gyms playing by the same rules, and that we don't have gyms opening up and just learning by trial and error on humans. It's just to have some basic set of rules that everybody is, kind of living by. And then ultimately, we'd like to have our state legislators take this and make some sort of a statewide legislation if they're willing to do that. I talked to Senator Bramble and Representative Sampay about it, and they seem amenable to looking into it and maybe doing something on a statewide level, because it really does encompass more than just our city. But we felt like at least for right now, we need to have some sort of regulation in place. And it's been a very positive outcome so far. In fact, the health department representative last meeting before she left, so she couldn't believe how well we were able to come together on this. Because I guess there was a lot of, disagreement and some, just issues when they talked about it before, so she was very complimentary about the process and how we were able to come together. So hopeful that we can bring a good piece of, draft legislation for your consideration. So. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Jones?
No. We just wanted to, I think, I just recommended to Chair Santiago after our last meeting that we can give you an update that was being worked on in case there were any concerns or feedback about it.
So if you get I sent you something, I don't know if it was on Facebook, but they've changed what's going on at the gym, Misty's gym. It's had a makeover apparently. And I haven't been over there to see it, but the video, that's really what's there, was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And of course, the new features, even though they look relatively safe, they may still have some of the other features there that are inherently more dangerous.
And this legislation does deal with the height of structures and how close they are to other structures, the padding, what kind of padding should go under the foam, how deep those kinds of things. Like, not deep, how deep, but some of the, I don't know, they've added some of these safety features of the physical structures within the gym into the legislation. They've looked at some of the
minimum training for the staff and minimum staffing levels. That's important.
and then participants' size and their ability levels, and trying to address some of those issues too, separating expert or more advanced skilled people with others who are less skilled, and by size too, trying to get some separation there and participants.
We talked previously, I just kind of wanted to reiterate, I think that accident reporting could be a very useful component of this, and I don't know how it would fit in. I haven't been able to attend any of the meetings, but as a component of this, where if each gym had to report their monthly and yearly accidents in a prominent place where people are going in to pay, and so they can, as they're about to swipe their card, they can look and say, wow, there were 3 broken legs just last month, and there's one person was paralyzed last year. Wow, do I really want to do that? And I think that helps the consumers to be more informed and understand what the risk is, the real risk that actually is happening, as well as I think that's a huge motivator for these gym operators to implement good safety, whether it's a regulation or not. They don't want to have those accidents potentially driving away potential customers. So I think accident reporting can be a good way, just kind of as a catch-all, to encourage just general good safety practice.
And I think that can work 2 ways. I could see it working that way, but also see it under-reporting, because you don't want to have to post something, And so I worry about the under-reporting part of it too. But the hope is that they'll feel free and comfortable and encourage all reporting, because you have some accidents that occur and people walk out and they don't even know that they've got a fractured neck until a few days later, and they're like, oh, my neck's really bothering me, and they go to the doctor. So those don't even get seen by the trauma surgeons necessarily, but they're not reported because the participant just, oh, I think I hurt my neck or I hurt my arm, but they don't actually get seen until later. They maybe go to the doctor and find out they've got a broken arm or broken something. And so we're hoping that with this legislation, we did, I think, add something where each participant, if they feel like they've been injured, they should report, even if they're not certain that something's broken or hurt, but they should, they should report, oh, I hurt my neck or I hurt my arm or whatever, just so that we have a little better reporting. So initially we might see an uptick in reporting once this legislation goes in, because we're hoping for people to report everything.
So just a response, I don't have any skin in the game right now. My boy doesn't work there anymore. We did for years, and we know the family.
Which gym is it?
Lowe's Extreme Sports.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been there many times, and I've heard about the training and the accidents and whatever. So if you actually posted there or at all these other establishments, during the last year or month, whatever, but let's say year, there was these injuries sustained here. The thing that first popped in my mind when you said that is, gee, if I walked into a restaurant, what I want to see during the last year, we had X many people get sick here. But they don't post that.
Yeah, choker, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And we don't require that of restaurants, which frankly can have infractions that are affecting public health and safety. But we do need to educate people in effective ways about how dangerous it can be.
And I think you have a point there too, where you do, and in their videos, somehow they need to report that you have to pay attention. If you're a parent, you have to watch your kids. You can't just, think this is just inherently safe, because it's not. But we make it as safe, if we can make it as safe as possible. And even the trauma surgeons, I mean, they love that kids are active. They love that they're doing active, fun things, and that they're exercising, and they're not, sitting like, Dr. Cook said, they're not sitting with their tablets or phones, that they're out actively doing things. They think that's great, that they want to encourage that, but just to provide some regulation so that they're not seeing the severity and the number of occurrences, where if we could just make it safer for these kids to still enjoy those places, because they can be, wonderful sorts of exercise as long as they're doing it in a safe manner and they have enough supervision and they have adequate, padding and protective equipment and that kind of thing. So really just trying to make it a safer experience for the consumers.
Right now, it's kind of been them policing themselves or making their own rules or whatever. And I've been in places like that where you just sign a waiver and you're kind of taking the risk on yourself. So if we make it specific that you need to do X, Y, and Z to make it safer for the customers, and then someone says, well, I don't think they really did X, Y, and Z, does it open them up to more lawsuits and liability, Brian?
Well, yeah, it could, certainly, because if somebody, the standard in those kind of lawsuits is whether or not the business met the standard of care for their business, right? And somebody, I would assume that a plaintiff's lawyer for somebody who's injured would point to the city standards as being at least a minimum standard of care. So
I guess my question will be, does it open us up to lawsuits if we don't enforce those minimum standards then?
No, in the sense that, you've heard me say this before, people can always sue us for anything. And they do, right? I mean, they sue us all the time for things that are not credible claims. But no, there's long-standing case law that enforcement is a discretionary function, and we have immunity for it. That doesn't, we've had people file on that basis before anyway, but we haven't lost any.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, we need to move into closed session. Do you mind introducing?
So as I understand, there's two items to be discussed, or proposed to be discussed at closed session. Both of them involve sale of property. Is that right?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Did you have administrative update before we do that?
So just under state law, a reminder that strategy sessions to discuss the sale of property are appropriate for closed meeting if there's previously been public notice given that the property is offered for sale. I'm not aware.
That's the case in both of these.
So with that in mind, then it'd be appropriate for a motion for closed meeting. And I understand from Mr. Strachan that once we close the meeting, we'll actually move down to the other room. So.
Is there a motion to close the meeting? Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Van Buren. All in favor? It's unanimous. Mr. Sewell. Excuse. Thank you.